Okay, we're ready to go.
Before we start, my commissioner is speaking. So,
Okay. All right, I'll go ahead and call to order the Planning Commission for Wednesday, July 24th. Roll call, please.
Chair Lane,
Here.
Commissioner Bryant,
Here.
Commissioner Polito,
Here.
Commissioner Tonelli. Here.
All right, great. The next item number 2 is for public comments for items not on the agenda. So we use this to hear about things that may have already been decided or new items that we want to hear about or just updates in general. And so I'll go ahead and open up the public comment section for anything that's not on the agenda for a comment. And the crowd is not running to the microphone, so I will go ahead and close the public hearing and come back to item 3, the approval of minutes. I didn't see anything that needed to be adjusted that I saw. Anybody see anything?
I move approve. I second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
I have to abstain.
You abstain? Yep. Okay. And then the next section is the public hearing items that we have. We have 4 tonight, actually. The first one will be for the lot line redesignation for 95 Benito. What we'll do on all our items tonight is we'll have an overview from staff, a staff member, and then the commission can ask staff for questions. Then we'll open up to public comment, starting with the applicant or their representative. Then we'll close the public comment section and bring it back to the commission for discussion and action as appropriate. We'll do that on every item. If anyone comes in later or online, you'll hear me say that again, just so everybody's on the same page about the process. One of the things I find is that everybody knows what the process is. It usually goes a little bit smoother. So with that, we'll start with the overview from 95 San Benito. Who got that one? Sean, you have that one?
This is a project by Rada Hiregrave. our
Oh,
senior
Rada. Hi.
Good evening, Chair Lane. How are you?
Very good. All right, give us the overview.
Good evening, commissioners. Yes, I'm going to share screen. Please let me know when you can see it. There it is, and I'm going full screen. Today we're talking about a lot line redesignation request. The parcel is in the southwest corner of the intersection of San Benito and Oak Drive. The dashed or yellow line is the town of Atherton's boundary. And to the north of it is city of Menlo Park. And per AMC 17.32, 17.20, the front lot line is defined to be the property line that is shown in red along Oak Drive. But the applicant would like to request a formal redesignation for this current project that they have on file for a remodel and addition of an existing home. The request is that the Planning Commission would review the application and the remodel project in conceptual and theoretically look at the impacts and make findings for the lot line redesignation to be redesignated to San Benito, which is shown as the yellow line, to be the front lot line. I will be walking the commission through the existing site and the proposed site as it affects the setback of the buildable area before and after the lot line redesignation. What you see here is the parcel, and what is shown in red is the main building setback line. In this scenario, Oak Drive is designated to be the front lot line, which is the required front lot line per AMC 17.20. As you can see, the shape of this parcel is is trapezoid. The lot depth is 234 feet, which requires that the front and rear needs to be 60 feet. And the lot width, which is measured at the front line of the building setback, is at 149 feet and 7 inches, which would require that the side setbacks would be 42.5 feet. The existing parcel in this scenario would have a portion of their south building line to be non-conforming, which is a bit of a concern. All of the triggers and all of the clarifications that we are seeing tonight is because we have a current application on file for a major remodel along this south side, which is marked in yellow in this site plan. And I'm going to walk you through a general overview of a major remodel and expansion towards the eastern side of this home that the applicants want to pursue. In this condition, because a majority of this south side has been rendered non-conforming, and the fact that there's an existing pool, which is the amoeboid shaped in the south side of the parcel, that the applicant and owner wants to take advantage of, they have given us a scenario wherein the lot line redesignation is much more favorable to the proposed project and also the way the site is aligned. Attachment 2 of this tonight's packet has a letter stating that they are respecting the current driveway conditions and the fact that the parcel is more linear along the north-south axis. They would like to review the redesignation in a way that it would support the addition and remodel project that they're envisioning. In this case, the line in blue, this is the front lot line. If the planning commission would approve the lot line redesignation, the lot depth immediately becomes lesser than 200. And parcels that were recorded before 1946, our code is giving the advantage of the front and rear setback to be less than 60 feet. In particular, the code says that the lesser depth for lots that were recorded earlier than 1946 have 30% reduction in the front and rear setback. And that's the advantage with the lot line redesignation and the way the building setback line works. And I want to bring your attention to this is the proposed building as the applicant is envisioning. This is still in a conceptual state and we'll have to review it formally once they get past the lot line redesignation part of it. They are expanding a slightly more into the eastern side. They are getting rid of the carport and building towards the east to be a 3-car garage and dining and more expansive living room on the east side and the south side. There will be no impact to the trees or a TPZ exception owing to this redesignation. As you can see, there's a portion of this redesignation that would render this existing structure to be non-conforming because it would encroach the setback. That is the only part that the applicant needs to address when they come to development. They have 2 options. They can retain the non-conforming part of the building as is with no changes to those walls and that space. Or they can take advantage of the ADU ordinance and convert a portion of that part to be an attached ADU, which can benefit the town by having an additional dwelling unit on the site. As you can see, the dashed line here shown in blue is the existing space, and the expansion is mostly on the south side, and most of the remodel and the major wall changes are towards the south side. This is the general overview of the site as we look at the scenarios before and after the lot line redesignation. The Planning Commission is required to make 2 specific findings in order to approve or deny this request. I have written up a detailed explanation which I can walk through quickly. The first finding of the parcel not being detrimental or injurious to property and person or improvements in the vicinity. Staff can make this finding because they are not making any changes to any part of the setback area. And in fact, the majority of the remodel would bring the south wall into conformance, which is something that staff is definitely going to support. It doesn't impact movement of the vehicles and people and goods around the subject property. The proposed and the existing conditions for the driveway remain to be along San Benito Avenue. And so we can make findings for finding number 1. For finding number 2, I have called out certain general plan land use policy goals where we are talking about maintaining of existing neighborhood environment and preserving that for the town. And most of San Benito Avenue has parcels facing the avenue itself and has circulation in and out of San Benito. So by formally redesignating this parcel towards San Benito, it would conform to the neighborhood orientation for the buildable area. And the lot is consistent with that pattern as we formalize the redesignation. And as part of the development, the applicants will have to meet minimum landscape screening requirement. They have to meet all the requirements for the development standards, and staff will work with them when they are ready to submit to that application. At this point, staff can make findings that we could support the redesignation request, and I will end my presentation at this point. The applicants are with us today, and I'm open for any questions that you might have, and I can help answer. And they are here too in case you need to have a chat with them. Thank you.
All right, I have no questions on this one. Do anybody have a question on this one? Yeah, just for the record, I live about 2.5 blocks away from this site, so I actually double checked to make sure that I'm far enough away to take action. Now I am, but I go by this spot, this site all the time. All right, so we'll go ahead and with no questions, I'll go ahead and open the public comment section. We'll start with the applicant or the representative. If there's anything that needs to be highlighted beyond the staff report, go ahead. Public comment section. Everybody's rushing to the
Hui
mic.
and the owner are online if you want to speak.
Okay, if you want to speak and you're online, you have to take yourself off mute.
Oh, hi. Yeah.
Hi.
Hi, everyone. My name is Hui. I'm the architectural designer for this project. And the owner is Hong Xiawei. I see she's online with us. So yeah, you can ask me any design questions. Yeah, thank you, Raha. Yeah, as Raha mentioned, the property is on the corner lot. So according to the Arlington City Code, the narrow side of the corner lot will be defined as the frontage. So in this case, the frontage aligns the Oak Drive side. And we are requesting to redesignate the San Benito Avenue side as the frontage because firstly, the set address is 95 San Benito Avenue. And the existing vehicle and pedestrians entrances on the lot is on this side. So we think it is more reasonable and logical to let the San Benito Avenue to be as the front. Right. Yeah, and secondly, yeah, we have another building permit application for the property, which is the house addition. Because the owner, she bought the house last year and she wants to remodel and expand the house a little bit before she moving in. And she enjoys the beautiful swimming pool on the lot. And she wants to have more open and light spaces. So in our design, you can see we create a new living space, a big kitchen, and a transparent staircase. So we have to, make some structure changes to this wall. And this can only be achieved if the San Benito Avenue side to be as the front. So, so the wall next to the swimming pool can be within the setbacks. Yeah, so we can make some changes, add the new windows and new glass folding doors to the wall.
All right, thank you.
Yes.
All right, anything else then? Any questions? You have a
I
question?
I
Bob?
have kind of a general question. Do we have any idea how many properties we have like this in Atherton where the front of the house and the address is not the front of the lot? Are there 100 of them or 2 of them?
I can't give you a specific number. I will say that, we frequently see it come up on corner properties. One of the things that we can do is look at when the lot was established, because there is a provision in the code that says if the lot existed pre-1946 and has building permits that kind of support the development toward and orientations towards a specific side, we can use that. And that's one tool that we've applied so that we don't have to bring these before you.
Yeah,
If, there's desire by the planning commission to look at greater flexibility that is permitted at the staff level, we can come back certainly, after some of our other policy initiatives are completed and look at that as well.
yeah,
So-
this one seemed like, I looked at it, I went, too bad they have to come to us for this.
Right.
But,
Yeah, the one thing I would, I think originally, if I understand correctly, the front property line was designed to be the narrow.
that's
so-
the
so it's
rule.
basi-
That's the rule.
Exactly. And what's happened over time is we're moving toward very linear houses facing the street. And so I think it's entirely appropriate to change these.
All right, anyone else here to speak on this item before I close the public comment section on this? All right, I'll go ahead and close the public comment section and bring it back for discussion and action as appropriate. Yeah, this one looks pretty straightforward to me.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I was shocked that the property line wasn't that way, because when I drive by this home, the home faces towards Bonita now, and it's done that probably since, it probably is a 1950, late 50s home or something like that. So it's always been that orientation. So I'm ready to make a motion, or you got a motion?
One
Go ahead.
question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Do we have to modify the motion to deal with that little sliver of the
Right, that's a
property
good
that?
Yeah, I agree about that.
Well, we don't get that until it's brought back. This is not a formal discussion about the plan. It's just the property designation.
Correct.
Yeah,
Okay, so
so,
that'll
That's
come back.
correct.
yeah, that'll come
That's
back,
good.
or it'll be accepted by staff.
Right.
Okay, make your
Yeah.
motion then.
Right. I'll move ahead. I'll move that the planning commission find the lot line redesignation to be categorically exempt from the CEQA section 15304 and approve the lot line redesignation to designate the easterly property line along San Benito Avenue as the front of the property line at 95 San Benito Avenue, subject to the conditions in the attached certificate and based on the findings and for reasons incorporated in the staff report.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Any comments on that? All right, roll call then. Let's go all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
No, 4-0, so they're all there. I'll go that way as much as I can tonight for speed. All right, the next item on the agenda, and for those of you who just came in, the process that we've been using is to go ahead and start with a staff overview, and then questions from the commission to staff, and then open up for public comment section, starting with the applicant or their designated representative first, and then anyone else would like to speak on the item. So we use that process for this too on the request for a variance at 123 Hawthorne Drive. And who's the staff person on this one?
That would be me.
All right, good. All right.
All right, commissioners, good evening. This item before you is a request for a variance to construct a detached garage within the required front setback area at 123 Hawthorne Drive. Staff recommends that the planning commission deny this variance request. This item was actually continued at the request of the applicant on April 24th, 2024, and the commission actually granted the continuance at that April Planning Commission hearing. This property is at 123 Hawthorne Drive in the Lindenwood neighborhood, and it's about a little bit less than an acre. The lot width is 156 feet to 185 feet, and the lot depth is measured from Laburnum Road is 240 feet. The property itself is generally flat, and the front lot line has been recognized as Laburnum Road, and the street side lot line has been recognized as Hawthorne Drive. There are actually 3 points of access to the property, 2 on Hawthorne Drive, which is the circular driveway, in the image here, and one on Laburnum Road for a standard, standard driveway. The proposed project involves the demolition of the existing home and the construction of a new single-family residence with pool and detached garage. The subject building for this variance request is a 740 square foot detached garage, approximately 15 feet in height. And while the proposed detached garage maintains an acceptable 8-foot distance from the main house and an 11-foot distance from the nearest side property line, this proposed accessory building maintains only 75 feet 2 inches distance from the front property line. And this is in conflict with the town's accessory building and structure general development standards for front setbacks, which requires that accessory buildings are set back 120 feet from the front property line or 30 feet behind the main structure, whichever is less. The proposed garage is only 75 feet from the front property line, where the requirement is set to be at least 90 feet from the front property line. So for those reasons, we are recommending a denial for the variance. In order to grant a variance, the Planning Commission needs to make 4 required findings, and in staff's analysis for the project, we were only able to make 1 of the 4 findings, and we'll go through them each in order. First to finding A, that there are special circumstances applicable to the property, including size, shape, topography, location, or surroundings such that the strict application of this title deprives such property of privileges enjoyed by other property owners in the vicinity and under identical land use zoning district classifications. Staff's review, this finding cannot be met because the shape of the lot is fairly regular. It's characteristic of other lots in the Lindenwood neighborhood and is not associated with other topographic challenges that would limit the development of the lot. The project is also part of a full site development that has yet to be constructed, and alternative locations of the proposed garage have been identified that don't require the issuance of a variance. To finding B, the applicant identified 3 other, the finding B is the granting of the variance, does not constitute a grant of special privileges inconsistent with the limitations upon properties in the vicinity and zone in which such property is situated. Again, staff's analysis was that this finding cannot be met. The applicant actually identified 3 other properties that may have had a similar situation where a detached accessory structure was actually approved in what appeared to be the front setback requirement. And in a review of the archival records of these properties, we actually saw that in these instances, the applicants did not encroach into the front yard setbacks because of the another orientation of the lot. Also within our archives, we were able to learn that the original building permit for this property at 123 Hawthorne recognized Laburnum Road as the front lot line, and this designation carries with the property for future development. So this is consistent with other lots neighboring the subject property and lots within the town's R1A zoning district, so we weren't able to make that finding. Finding C, the granting of this variance will not adversely affect the interest of the public or the interest of residents and property owners in the vicinity of the premise in question. We were able to make this finding. Although we received a single letter from the public requesting the commission deny the variance requests, staff was able to make this finding. The location of the proposed garage actually maintains the existing driveway location, complies with height and floor area requirements, and exceeds the standard side setback requirement of 10 feet. It's currently proposed at 11 feet, applied to the accessory buildings in the R1A zoning district. Therefore, the proposed garage will not create an undue privacy impact to neighbors and adjacent properties. And finally, to finding D, the granting of the variance is consistent with the objectives of the general plan and the zoning code. Staff's analysis was that this finding can also not be met. For this one, the general plan doesn't specifically establish a requirement or right for garages or parking. And as this project doesn't comply with the front setback standards of the municipal code, and doesn't have special circumstances applicable to the lot as established in the first finding, we came to the conclusion that this final finding cannot be met. So with that, in summary, our recommendation for this item, for item 4C, is to deny the variance request, and I'll be happy to answer your questions.
All right, any questions?
Yeah, I have.
Yeah.
So Sean, I assume that you've probably already had this conversation, but I'm just curious about, would this plan qualify for redesignating the lot line? That would be one
Mhm.
possibility. The second one would be if they built an ADU on top of the garage.
Right.
How does that change?
That's
it?
exactly my question too.
Yeah, and then the third one is if they just attach the garage to the house.
Right. Those are all three of my questions, yeah.
Okay, so,
Right.
so do those solve the problem, if any of those?
To answer the lot line redesignation question, that's a popular one. So for this one, this is the current proposed project. As you can see, the garage is not in compliance with the front side setback. If we were to treat Hawthorne Drive as the front side setback, the issue would be is that the lot depth is less than 200 feet. So with that, the main house as proposed would not be in compliance.
So we
So-
flip one problem for another.
That's right. Right. Which explains the variance request application. As to a garage on top of
ADU.
an ADU on top of the garage. Gonna ask Brittany Brendix to join me on this one.
Town planner Brittany Bendix. So just adding the ADU on the garage would not allow the garage to encroach in any setbacks through a kind of an incentive. In fact, ADUs, when located above garages, must comply with the setbacks for accessory structures.
If it were an ADU alone, not a garage, it would be okay there.
Correct.
But as a garage, it can't be there, and using the ADU as an excuse for the garage location is not allowed.
I'm sorry, Sean, is the garage greater than 800 square feet?
In this case, the garage is under 800 square feet,
Okay,
740
so yes,
square
the
feet.
Yeah.
structure could be
Right.
approved as an ADU.
Right. And then the other question was about the attachment. If the garage moves 8 feet over to touch the house, is it allowed then?
If the garage was attached to, it would not be within the setbacks for the main building.
It would not be within the setbacks for the main building?
If it was an attached garage to the main house,
Yeah,
it would still need to comply with the general development standards for the main building, and it would not be within setbacks.
all right. So how does the main building qualify now then if that doesn't, if the garage were to just move 8 feet over to touch the house, that the house is in compliance as it's planned right now, right?
If it was an attached garage, it would be considered an extension of the main house.
Yeah,
So in that case, at its current size, it would not be within the setback requirements. The current house with the 8-foot separation between the garage and the main house is in compliance with the main.
oh, because then the housing footprint would be too big for its spot. I
That's
got it.
correct.
All right, okay. Well,
Those are the
all right,
questions I had.
so let's go ahead and hear from the applicant. We gave some feedback to the architect last time I was here, but you're back. All right, so let's go ahead and open up the public comment section.
Speak into the microphone.
Yeah,
a
yeah, just
little
speak.
more,
Yeah,
please.
or you speak a little louder and you'll be fine at that height. Yeah, no problem.
I'll take a couple minutes and tell you why we're here. And just to start out, I've been practicing in architecture down here. Much time. I don't take it up. But we think it's a good case here. So I think it's all clear, but we're not really asking for a front setback exception. The division of code says an accessory structure is supposed to be 30 feet back from the house. That makes sense. You want this accessory structure to be supported.
Right.
In this case, though, historically, the front is built awful.
Mhm.
One of the reasons that we showed on our plans the alternate locations is that we could wind up with the front of the house
Mhm.
on awful. But our feeling is that that's not the spirit of that ordinance, section of the ordinance. I think it's set up for standard infill lots.
Mhm.
We do that all the time. Got an infill lot, house, and construction like that. Part Oh, it was off. Good thing I'm speaking loud. Anyway, thank you, Sean.
Take two. Go ahead.
Over again?
Go ahead and introduce yourself just for the record, just.
Steve Simpson, SDG Architecture on the
right, very
architect for the
good.
project. So, yeah, so it's set up for an infill. That section of the code is set up for an infill lot, and a corner lots propose it or have a whole different dynamic. And I think what we were trying to state with those alternate locations, mainly the one on Hawthorne, is that we could do that and we wouldn't be here. We don't think it's a better solution, and we don't think it's consistent with the intent of that section of the ordinance. And there are many properties, corner properties around. I mean, you can line the garage up with a building setback there. It doesn't have to always be 30 feet back on a corner lot. It has to be 30 feet back from one side, not all of it. So, and in this specific case, it just, we really feel that this is a better solution, and it's not inconsistent with other properties. It may not be to the letter of some of the other properties, but you drive around Lindenwood, and I've driven around a lot, and there's really no pattern of garages. Some are attached, some are detached, some are toward the front, some are not. There's a garage configuration very similar to what we're proposing at the corner of Laburnum and Magnolia. If you just drive down the street, you'll see the garage and you see the house. But the non-variance option in putting the garage on Hawthorne, garage is 45 feet from the street. And we can do that tomorrow. And we're asking for 75 feet, which is a significantly bigger setback. So that's why we're here. We think it's a better solution, and we're not, taking it lightly on that regard. With regard to the findings, we do think there are special circumstances applicable to this property. A, it's a corner lot, and B, it's a corner lot that historically the front has been the side property. And as you guys were just mentioning and asking, I think this is, I mean, from our analysis, and we didn't do citywide, but we kind of looked at Lindenwood, maybe 20% of the lots are corner lots. And I think less than half of that are properties that the front historically has been facing the side. So I think you're looking at less than 10% of the lots. And I think if you took the west side of El Camino into that, it would even go down because the streets are longer. There's not as many corner lots. So I think this is a unique property just by the virtue of those two features. And we don't think that this would be a granting of special privilege because we identified in our original thing three properties that were very similar, maybe not exactly, but perceived. If you're driving down the street, they would perceive the same. There's another one we've since then 2 Rosewood, and then the one I mentioned at Magnolia and Laburnum. Anybody driving by them would look the same. So I think it's not a special privilege, and I think any corner lot has the option. There's one side that you could put the garage all the way to the building setback. So it's not a special privilege. Other corner lots would have a similar configuration. So we think that finding can be met. There's no impact to the public. I mean, like I mentioned, the pattern of garages in Lindenwood is all over the place. And if that garage was attached, so you had asked about if the garage was attached. Well, if it was attached, it doesn't meet one other setback, but the location in relation to Laburnum would be fine.
Right.
So, so that, and then I'll finish up here because it's like you guys might have a long night with some other stuff. But I think it actually, the last finding, I think it does conform more to whatever the general plan is, because the intent of that rule is to put garages, make them subordinate to the front of the house, not necessarily the narrow side. It says the front of the house, and we've tucked this garage around, not on the front. It's where the garage has historically been, where the driveway has historically been. So we're not changing the pattern of the neighborhood. So I think that finding it is consistent with whatever the objective was with that aspect of the code, which required accessory structures to be 30 feet back from the front. I don't think that meant the narrow side. Anyway, my client, Matt and Amy Hines are here. I think they want to get up and say a couple things,
Okay,
and then
great.
we'll let
Great.
you.
Go ahead.
Thank you.
Hi there, how are you?
Hi.
My name is Matt Hines. I'm one of the owners. My wife, Amy, is here with me as well. Certainly, thanks for taking the time to review this variance for us. I had a whole long speech prepared this evening, and Steve stole a lot of my thunder, so I'm going to keep it relatively short, knowing what you guys have on the agenda. I think the two main points that I would call out and just reiterate from Steve, and my dad's actually a part of a planning commission down in San Diego in a suburb called Santa Luz, and I asked him before I came here tonight, like, what should I focus on? What should I talk about? He talked about, hey, is it consistent with the overall community? What does Lindenwood look like? What, are you doing anything that does not fall within the look and feel of other homes, or is it dissimilar? The other thing he talked about, are you impacting your neighbor in any negative way? Now, you guys might perceive this in a different way, or you might look at other standards, but those were kind of the two that he directed me on. When I look at the first, the thing that I will point out is a lot of what Steve said. We certainly have an option B here. And that option B is we could put that garage on the Hawthorne side, which would then no longer be a subordinate. And so I continue to go back, as Steve said, and I've read too much of this code for many, many hours trying to figure out if I can be an expert in it like you guys are. But what I see is that we're actually, because it's the nuances of this complex corner lot, we have the ability to put it up front, which I don't think is really what Lindenwood and the property owners and even us as a town want to have. We want it set back. We want it tucked behind the building so it's not visible from the street. And I think with what we've proposed and for this variance here, I think we do accomplish that overall goal in the spirit of what I think the code is intending. That corner lot they're hard. And I think if this were just a normal lot, we built a home 8 years ago in Menlo Park, and we went through this process. We didn't ask for exceptions or anything like that. The reason why we're asking for an exception here is because we do want to do what we believe is the right thing. And candidly, this we look at as our kids growing older, and as they go to college, and hopefully we can incent them to come back and hang out. This is what we refer to in our house as a forever home. And so we want to make sure that we make it right and that we set it up so that it is set up the right way, not just for us, but also for the second point I'd make, which is our neighbors. So we met with our neighbors about 3 months ago on the Laburnum side. We went through the same process, as I said, in Menlo Park, certainly spent time talking to our neighbors to help make sure everything worked and we were good neighbors there. They enjoyed being part of the process. We asked them about this setback. They actually appreciated if it were to move forward because the way they're situated on their lot, their master bedroom and their entertainment area in the back, actually it comes into their line of sight and then their view. And so if we move it forward this 11 or 12 feet, it actually helps them and they actually are supportive of this variance themselves. And so again, I come back to, we are trying to do what we believe is right in the spirit of this. And as having been in this community for over 20 years and raised our kids here and been active and engaged, we hope that you'll take it under strong consideration and that you'll think about approving this variance this evening. So I appreciate the time.
Thank you.
Thank
Now,
you.
you're going to use part of the existing foundation too, is that correct?
No, we will actually take the entire building out.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was thinking I read that. All right,
Yep.
great. Thank
Thank
you. All right. Anyone else here to speak on that? All right. All right, good. Then I don't see anybody online that's waving their hands or taking themselves off mute. So I'm going to go ahead and close the public comment section and bring it back for discussion and action as appropriate. This is one of those ones where the plan itself is totally acceptable, and you're right. It fits into the neighborhood, and everything about it looks like a good plan. The one of the nuances of the way that planning is structured in Atherton as opposed to other environments that have more of a style component to it or something, an aesthetic component, is the rules. And the good side of that is that you know exactly what you're getting into. The bad side is when it makes sense to be flexible, there's not really a good channel to be flexible. And that's happened before. So there would be nothing wrong with this. It matches the styles of so many homes right around it. When I went by, I said, this looks the same, and it's just the measurements. And in fact, if the garage were where it's supposed to be, it gets it farther back, close to the neighbor's backyard behind. I looked at that right away and said, if that were the garage location, would actually be more in their backyard than the closer one. So, the notion that I don't know if the notion of a corner lot is enough of a unique lot to make the call. but that would be the only thing to hang our hat on.
So
Yeah. Go ahead.
I have some similar thoughts, but two things. One is I think the arguments made tonight are strong arguments, but what that really argues for is at some point to put corner lots on the agenda of
Yeah.
the planning commission. The planning commission is really, as you'll see tonight, is really overloaded right. Staff is overloaded right now. So this is not something that's going to happen right away. But to your point, we've seen a number of these property line redesignations, and it's really around this issue because houses are grand linear. And so I think that's worth studying that. But to your point, the rules are the rules. And the problem is your project's a great project. It probably works better the way you propose it to work. If we make it a variance, someone else comes in with a corner lot, it might not be a very favorable situation for neighbors, but now we've set a precedent and we have to honor that. And so
Yeah.
we have to stick with the rule. I mean, that's the way it is.
So I don't know you're thinking on that, or, go ahead.
Well, I'm always with, well, I view the plan as common sense. I have a tough time granting the variance just on that
Right.
fact alone. I really am reticent to set any kind of a precedent to see how it's followed up.
Yeah, it's, so Bob, you got something?
Just a question. What exactly does that little bit of space from where you show the complying garage, what does that get for you there? Is that going to be entertainment space or?
I'm gonna open up public comment section again then, and then you can come up. Yeah, I opened it up for public comment. Go ahead.
It's an impact on the rear yard, and by moving it back, you look straight out the living room, dining room at the side of the garage. So that's the advantage, and
It basically puts it in the middle of the backyard and behind the house.
Yeah, and I would only say, I think every variance would be looked at individually. I don't know if there's a big threat of a precedent, because everyone is going to be different, but that's the reason for why we're trying to we've gone through all of this in the months of delay, just to kind of get this thing right. We're just trying to do it right.
Yep. But anyone else here to talk? Amy, you want to talk on this one? Go ahead and introduce yourself and.
Hi, I'm Amy Hines, and I am one of the homeowners as well. And I'm hearing you, and I respect greatly rules.
Uh-huh.
I am a rule follower. I'm a rule setter. And the only time that I look at rules and ask, is this a rule to be broken, is when it's common sense.
Yeah.
And so to me, this is a rule where I understand I'm a letter of the law person, and I wouldn't be here if I didn't believe that the letter of the law and the spirit of the law are in conflict here. And to me, that is, to Steve's point, a variance. We have to go through this process. Because you granted a variance to one home doesn't mean all of a sudden everyone who comes in gets that variance. There has to be a good reason for looking at it. So I just ask that you again, with great respect for the spirit or the letter of the law, that you also consider whether this variance might be a unique situation and not a precedent-setting situation.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, and no one else here to speak on that item. I'm going to close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission. Go ahead.
I heard everything that they said, and I'm supportive of it, even though it breaks precedent.
Well, I can make a case that this is a unique corner relative to the situation it puts on the development and relative to the neighborhood. I mean, this is right consistent with the design in the neighborhood. You go by 10 homes and 4 of them have this setup. I'm comfortable on this one, but and the idea that it's an exception that we thought through and said, why is this an exception compared to other ones? It's okay with, we've done things with trees that were like the tree was in the wrong spot and it looked like it was just a no-brainer. It fit, it complied, but it was the wrong spot. The garage in the rule compliant location is a bad plan. And so when I have a choice between coming up with a smart plan and coming up with a reason that seems reasonable for the right plan to be installed, I try to do that whenever I can, and not very much around here, let me tell you.
I think I'm in Bob's camp as far as not wanting to set a precedent, but trying to do what makes sense.
All right, then I'm
I
ready to make
appreciate Bob's comment. Thank you, Bob.
Yeah, go ahead.
So again, let me restate. So the next applicant that comes in with a corner lot that we don't like, they're going to cite this as.
Yeah, I understand that, and I'm gonna say a couple of things. What's the impact on neighbor?
Yeah.
The visibility of this is gonna be better in that location than it would be as a front garage. The light of a car coming in the driveway is gonna be better for the neighbor coming in that way than straight back at the neighbor's yard. Everything about it has less impact on the neighbor that's right next to it. And in fact, it has less impact on the traffic the traffic flow in general, because it gets the traffic off that main drag that everybody comes up and down. So all those things are things that I think can be considered unique to this site. So with that, I move the planning commission approve the variance at 123 Hawthorne Drive to construct an accessory building within the required front yard setback based on the findings outlined by the planning commission in this meeting, and subject to the conditions listed in the draft variance. So the compliance aspects of it that we have to specify. One is it's a unique situation relative to neighbors and the corner, this particular corner lot, as well as the traffic impact. And there's no negative impact on the general plan overall. And as you said, it doesn't impact the neighborhood. Does that give you the answers you need for how we would make this comply?
Sure. If you'd like to review attachment 4, which is the variance request letter from the applicant, they are able to answer or respond to each of the findings.
All right.
If you'd like to use that as a
That sounds good to me. Is that all right? All right, I have a motion, I have a second.
Yeah, if you say you can fix it, then I second the motion.
All right. Yep, moved and seconded. We'll take a roll call on this one.
Sure. Motion to approve the variance request application. Chair Layton,
Yes.
Commissioner Polito,
Yes.
Commissioner Bryant,
No.
Commissioner Tonelli.
Yes.
All right,
Motion
there you
passes
go.
3-1.
All right, be a good neighbor. All right, thank you. All right. Now, item C is tonight we're going to be reviewing the resolutions and all the components of it. We're not taking an action tonight. That'll come back for the next meeting. So I just want to make sure everybody knows that we're not going to be voting on anything tonight. We're going to make sure. So I had a choice this weekend of reading the Old Testament or this packet. I chose this packet. So there's a lot to go through here. And there's a lot of detail within each of it. Some of it we've seen before, so it wasn't like a blind read of 1,000 pages. But it is the type of thing where we want to spend time distilling down the components. That's Brittany will go through that with us. Then we'll go ahead and open up the public comment section for things. The objective tonight is to, one, get through the discussion on the different components of this. Two, get commissioner thoughts on it, and then get input from anyone's here so that we can put that into the system of evaluating what would stay the same or what might be suggested to the city council, and then prepare it for the proposal to be sent to the city council in September, correct? This September?
For their September meeting,
Yeah,
correct?
so for their September meeting. All right, so that's the objective. So if anybody comes in ready to say, don't vote on that, I'll be able to tell them we're not voting on anything tonight. We're just getting feedback and going over the overview. So with that, we'll go with the consideration of the resolution of the 2023 to 2031 housing element and zoning code update discussion and overview. And Brittany, this is you and Tom, right?
Yes, it is. So thank you for that introduction. I'm Brittany Bendix, the town planner. Next slide. So tonight, as Chair Lane was explaining, this is really just, the purpose of this meeting is to introduce all of the documents that we've prepared, and you can tell that they're quite extensive for consideration by the Planning Commission. What eventually will happen is the Planning Commission has to make a recommendation on the items within this packet for ultimate consideration and adoption by the City Council. So this is a process that is kicking off tonight in terms of sharing these documents. I suspect that they'll be revised again before August, before the August discussion with the Planning Commission meeting, based on some of the feedback we get here tonight, but as well as some of the feedback that I know is going to come in over the next month. Even if the Planning Commission moves the recommendation forward to the City Council for their meeting in September, there's still opportunity to provide additional feedback and refinement through that space. And then we are anticipating at least 2 meetings with the City Council. So right now that stands to look at as September and October. So just for those of you who have taken all the paper versions of the packet and are cramming right now, trying to take a little pressure off of you, just so that you know that these are basically the drafts of what we hope to be moving forward, and you have some time to provide written comments throughout this period. So tonight's goal is to give you a high-level overview of what's in these what's in these documents, so that you know where to focus your time if you're interested in one particular area. And I will say that all of these documents are shared on the town's housing element website. Typically, when we produce a staff report, the materials are linked to the agenda for the Planning Commission meetings. Personally, I find that difficult to navigate, so I wanted to make sure that all of the materials for tonight's meetings were clearly posted on the website and available there. So you don't have to go searching through the agenda packet. So looking at the documents that are included, everything that has to do with the CEQA component of the project is attachments 1 through 4. That is the initial study and mitigated negative declaration. I have a slide that'll run through kind of all of the documents associated with that. Then we're going to look at the revisions to the 2023-2031 housing element. That's basically all of the high-level changes that are included in the revised housing element since it was adopted January 31st, 2023. Because of the language in that document, we need to make certain changes to the general plan and municipal code. That is a lot of actions that are required by the City Council. That includes general plan text amendments. Just a reminder that the housing element itself lives in the general plan, but we also have to make some clarifying changes in other elements like the land use element and the noise element. So I'll go over that. The municipal code text amendments, if you are really interested in the standards for multifamily development, that's where a lot of that lives, as well as any sort of other programmatic changes from the housing element that are required to be in the municipal code. Well, we have a slide on that. Tom is here tonight to introduce the standards and walk through some of the thought process that was included there. Additionally, we have to do a zoning map amendment so that it's very clear what sites are within the multifamily overlay. The PFS sites and POS sites are really just portions of a site. They're not contiguous with the actual lot boundaries. So I'll touch on that. And then we have some draft resolutions, so you can see what the actual recommendation document looks like that the Planning Commission works on, and then that gets to the City Council. When we go to the City Council, there will be another set of resolutions specifically drafted as actions by the City Council, as well as copies of Planning Commission's adopted resolutions. So the attachments will grow at some point as we move forward through this process. And again, they will likely change. Next slide. So our recommendation tonight is really just to introduce the documents, implementing the housing element and zoning code updates, and then again, to continue the discussion August 22, Planning Commission's regular scheduled hearing on August 28th, 2024, and then direct staff to provide additional information as required or requested. A brief overview of the background of why we're here today. The town adopted its housing element in January 31st, 2023. That was after roughly 18 months of public comment, and it was the third public draft of the housing element at that point. In response to that, there was over 1,000 pages of public comment. That document was then submitted to HCD, the Housing and Community Development Department, Housing and Community Development Department of California. They issued a response letter on April 4th that highlighted a number of issues that the town needed to work on. That then directed some meetings with the city council over the course of the summer. On September 20th at the city council meeting, the city council arrived at a firm project description that effectively set the scope of work that the CEQA analysis needed to cover. So the CEQA analysis kind of looks at this point at the largest scope of project that could be considered. One of the things you'll see come up in the CEQA response to comments is what happens if additional sites are added to the housing element. That means that we have to go back through CEQA, that we have to make a consideration. It would take quite a few months to do that at this point to add any new sites. So the question really is at this point, how do you change the extent of the scope and work down? On May 10th, the town published the initial study and mitigated negative declaration. That is the CEQA analysis that is required by law to evaluate all of the environmental impacts on that. It was a 30-day public notice, and it analyzed the housing element, the revisions necessary to comply with HCD, the potential additional sites, and all of the implications from the rezoning. Next slide. So this slide is meant to summarize the CEQA review process. From the initial study and mitigated negative declaration, or ISM&D, it identified a variety of areas that were potentially significant impacts unless mitigation was incorporated. That included air quality, biological resources, cultural resources, greenhouse gas, noise, transportation and traffic, and tribal cultural resources. This was identified in the public draft of the ISM&D, which was shared on May 10th. In response to that, the town received 5 comment letters. That's included as attachment 3 in the staff report. Those comments identified issues relative to cumulative impacts, general plan consistency, aesthetics, privacy, tree protections, traffic safety, greenhouse gas emissions, noise, and flooding. In response to those issues raised, the town prepared a response to comments. That letter is included as attachment 2. Ultimately, the town determined that the ISM&D's mitigation measures that are in place to reduce the potentially significant impacts did not require any changes. Therefore, the ISM&D did not have to go through another recirculation process of a 30-day notice. And we're carrying this forward for consideration of approval. We did, however, make one revision to the ISM&D, and that's with the project description and clarification that at any point additional sites are added to the multifamily overlay district, there would be additional CEQA analysis required. Finally, at attachment 4, this is called a mitigation monitoring reporting program. Frequently, we use the acronym MMRP. This is a document that when a project comes in, it is used as a checklist for the project and to communicate with planning staff, the building department, any sort of specialist such as a biologist that might have to participate in the project. and it goes through and works through all of the mitigation measures that are required for that project. Finally, just reiterating that the Planning Commission makes a recommendation to the council. The council is the one that approves the CEQA document. Next slide. So the general plan updates substantially respond to issues raised by HCD in their April 2023 letter. We had a study session on roughly half of the text changes to the housing element earlier in April. On April 29th, it was a joint study session with the Planning Commission and City Council. And so a lot of the feedback that we received from that is included. That study session focused on the housing needs analysis, the fair housing assessment, and the past performance. There is a required section of every housing element where the jurisdiction has to look at all of the goals and programs from the prior cycle and determine whether or not those programs were successful. So that analysis is included. New information that has been added outside of the April 29th study session focuses on the 5 bullet points that I have here, and I've also listed in the staff report. This includes updates to the site analysis. This update aligns with the 2023 annual progress report. The annual progress report is a document that jurisdictions are required to provide to HCD that shows how they're performing relative to their RENA allocation and their housing element goals. So, for example, this includes any ADUs, an update on the ADU count that the town is anticipating performing at in terms of we expect X number of ADUs every single year to achieve this number of below market rate units. The next item I want to point out is an updates to the constraint analysis that includes the needs analysis, the fair housing assessment, and any sort of programmatic assessments. This is important because the town didn't necessarily identify potential constraints on housing development that is included in the programs that were adopted on January 31st, 2023. For example, the town has a program to adopt an inclusionary housing ordinance. The constraint section looks at, does an inclusionary housing program put undue constraint on the development of housing? That narrative didn't previously exist, and so that's the type of discussion that was added. The next point is that it asserts a timeline, measured outcomes, and corrective actions for every single program in the housing element. So, for example, using the inclusionary housing study, HCD actually state law requires that you say the ordinance will adopted by this time. It will, if it's unsuccessful, then we'll revisit it at in 3 years. And so there's these measured outcomes that are pretty standard in goal setting that have now been put into housing element law, and we had to revise the program language to comply with. There are edits sprinkled throughout the entire document that identify when a program specifically responds to an identified issue. So, for example, in the needs assessment, if it identified that there were additional needs for senior housing, we then add in a reference to program X deals with senior housing, or C program X, right? That's really the effort captured there. And finally, there's an update to the community outreach summary. Other revisions to the general plan I touched on briefly at the very beginning of this presentation. This really includes referencing the multifamily overlay threaded throughout the land use element and the noise element. For example, there's a table in the noise element that identifies acceptable noise standards for single family housing, but there's no row in that for multifamily housing. So we have to add a row for multifamily housing. There is a land use map figure LU1 that we needed to update to identify any sort of multifamily overlay zones. And then we are recommending removal of land use policy LU 1.4, which specifies a limit to the town-wide height of 34 feet. This isn't actually something that has been consistently followed through the town, mainly because people don't expect height limits to be in the general plan. And so it's at times, I think, been potentially overlooked because they expect to find the height limit in the zoning code, and the zoning code and the general plan have an inconsistency here. So I know that some of you may think that it's correlating to the standards for multifamily, but really actually it's just to resolve the consistency issue. I would prefer that any sort of discussion about height limits just live in the zoning code, because that's where developers, planners, building code officials would look to identify what height limits are. Next slide. The municipal code updates. These are quite extensive as well. Revisions, most of the revisions at this point are to Chapter 17 for the zoning code. However, I do anticipate there might be some stretch within the municipal code to other sections, depending on how discussion with the Planning Commission and City Council goes. For example, heritage tree standards live in Chapter 8. But right now, there's no changes proposed to that. It's really limited to Chapter 17. I've broken it up as revisions to Chapter 17 relative to the land use tables. The land use tables tell you what uses are allowed within that zoning district. They don't really get into standards like height and setbacks. So most of the updates to this table or these tables, because there's one for every zoning district, are reflective of state law requirements and align with the housing element program. So if you're wondering why something's in the land use table, you should look for the cross-reference to section 3.800 of the updated housing element. And then the second additional change here was clearly to add reference to any multifamily overlay zones. The next bullet I have is addition of the multifamily standards to Chapter 17 of Attachment 9. This is really getting at everything from page 12 to 46. This establishes two multifamily overlay districts. One is RM10, which is the density of 10 dwelling units per acre. This applies to R1A, R1B, and POS sites. And then RM20/RM40. We decided to merge these because they're applicable to the school sites and the PFS zones, and they really share the same standards as we've written them. The third bullet point, updating the zoning map to identify the multifamily overlay sites. This is going to look a lot like what the general plan land use 1 map looks like. I do want to clarify that if sites get removed through this process, those maps would then be updated to reflect that. So, you know, this isn't static at this point. This is just where we're currently at in the conversation. The fourth bullet point is the inclusionary housing ordinance. That is not in the packet. That has not yet been released. That's forthcoming. I expect to have the draft released in August, so sometime next month. We'll look to see whether or not we can include it, but we are trying to pace ourselves here. Ultimately, this implements program 3.814 of the housing element, which requests or directs the town to include a 20% or study a 20% inclusionary housing component. And then finally, just noting again that the Planning Commission throughout all of these actions is a recommending body. They're not the decision maker. Next slide. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Tom Ford at M Group, who's going to go through some of these zoning issues that were identified through the community meetings we've had since last fall, and talk a little bit about the thought process behind the zoning code standards that we've developed.
Brittany, real quick, before we go to that next phase, can we just double check to see if there's questions on this, all the first things that she went over, because each one of these has, we're not throwing these away. We're going to keep them so you don't have to print them again. So there's any questions at this point, there's miscellaneous things that I highlighted here, but I can take them offline because there's nothing major, just was for clarifications. Go ahead, Tom. You have something?
Well, as I went through these documents, I definitely have a couple of questions on the housing element.
Yeah.
And I have a number of questions on the traffic study.
Okay,
And then I have some suggestions about some of the responses.
okay.
All right. So you want to do that now, or do you want to do it in the next month individually with us, or how's best for you?
It's at the pleasure of the commission.
All right, let's go ahead and just highlight some of the issues.
Sure. Sorry, Sean, can you track what they're discussing and have that slide up so that we have some sort of framework or reference guide?
So, and I can tell you, so page 6, table 2 in the housing element.
All right, go ahead.
It's on the screen, but,
You're
good, Sean's just going to track it.
Yeah.
So in
You'd
table
like it-
2,
I'm sorry, you'd like this on the screen?
Well, if you've got it, but.
Oh, sure. Okay.
I know what it is.
Okay, wait 1 second.
But the audience may not. Page 6.
Brittany, I'll go over any questions during the next couple of weeks that I come up with, and then some of them are just going to be clarification, others could be suggestions.
Sure, and I would invite any of the public here or watching online or viewing this after it's posted on the website to feel free to schedule time with me one-on-one.
All right.
Yeah, this is not table 2. Let me just go through because it's real quick.
Sure.
Yeah.
So in table 2, what we're showing is where we expect the housing units to come from to meet the RENA requirement. And so in table 2, we specifically are including the public school sites. And so what I wanted to check, has HCD actually confirmed or acknowledged that they will accept teacher and staff, school staff housing as meeting the RENA requirements?
So yes, the issue we have relative to housing in school is not with teacher and student housing necessarily. The issue is with dormitories and shared housing where there's individual rooms and a shared kitchen. That's usually the problem that we run into relative to counting towards RENA. That is something that the city manager's office and some members of the city council are trying to discuss with HCD and look for some flexibility there. But when we talk about teacher housing or maybe graduate or postdoc housing, we're looking at actual individual units, not the shared housing configuration where everybody is on one floor sharing a kitchen or
And when we were looking at new dormitories for Menlo College, I've asked this question because I thought for sure that would count, but it doesn't count because it's a shared bathroom and shared.
Yeah, no, state law specifically excludes
Right,
dorms.
yeah.
right.
But the question I'm really asking is, so earlier in this process, some of the consultants basically said from a fair housing perspective, because it was not open to public selection for those units, it would not qualify for RENA. So that's what I'm asking. Has HCD overridden that?
So excellent question. It's completing a couple points. The PFS sites and the housing that's included there for RENA does count towards RENA. The issue that we're having and we're responding to with HCD is that those multifamily sites, you need to be part of the organization or an affiliate of the organization to take advantage of. And so that's why we've had to open the multifamily housing program to privately owned R1A and R1B sites, because that is really open to the market to develop. It's not something that if multifamily housing is provided, that you then have to be part of an institution in order to live there.
So just to expand on that, so again, in table 2, so the the school housing is really in table 2 to provide housing for very low income and low income. And then the RM10 zoning is moderate income, basically, I think.
Yes, yes, it is. It
And
can be
so-
moderate income. We do expect an inclusionary housing program to be added to that so that you do get a percentage of low-income units out of that. But the town's RENA program is much more heavily reliant on the PFS sites and the EDUs to make that lower income
Yeah.
requirement.
But your sense is that HCD has acknowledged this and that,
Yes.
okay, all right. I'm good. Okay, that's the only question I have on the housing element. I want to jump to the traffic study. And I'm going to actually use the consultants. It's easier to sign. So on their page,
Which section are you on? Let me see the front page.
it's the Hexagon Transportation
Okay.
Consultants. At their
Right.
consulting element.
Yeah.
That's right. So on,
This one,
yeah, on page, yeah, that one.
this one.
So on page,
Here,
double,
Bob, this one if you want to.
Yes.
yeah, yeah, double little I. Sean, don't try to find it. So, you know, in the second paragraph here, they talk about that that Ravenswood is a low VMT location. And so, and I know that and if it's a high VMT, which we'll talk about maybe in a minute, then things, you know, there are consequences of that. And so my question about the Ravenswood site is, and again, I recognize it's not our responsibility to deal with the Parkline and SRI traffic report, but it's clearly going to be thousands of cars. And so the question I'd like the traffic people to confirm is that as the SRI and Parkline moves through the process, does their assessment for the Ravenswood particles change in terms of the VMT? Does it move to high VMT because of what SRI and Parkline are doing? And all that data is out there now, so they should be able to answer that question for us.
Right, clearly they, if I could just interject, our multifamily and associated stuff in the housing element is talking about adding almost 5,000 daily trips. And yet they're saying everything's hunky-dory. It clearly had to be done without consideration of the Parkline project. There is absolutely no way that can be mediated. No way.
So the VMT analysis, it did take into consideration a level of the Parkline project. Since we've published the analysis, the Parkline proposal has released an EIR, and we are reviewing that to look at what their VMT analysis showed. Generally speaking, a VMT analysis identifies the number of trips associated with development and then can use transit development management strategies to reduce those trips. So I have not yet read through the entire EIR for Parkline, but I will because I have been asked to present to the council on it. Looking at what their collection of TDM measures entail is how they bring that VMT analysis lower. So for example, I know that they're providing a dedicated bike lane along the southern edge of Ravenswood. And so because that is a major transportation and pedestrian improvement, that will lower overall trips within that corridor, not just the trips associated with Parkline. It makes it easier for students to get from downtown Menlo Park to Menlo Atherton, for example.
Yeah,
So that's kind of how they frame that argument and what the transportation analysts would look at.
But again, I'm just going back. So
Sure.
in part, they're saying here that the Ravenswood parcels are exempt because they're within a half mile of a major transit corridor, I think.
Right.
And so my question is, again, I mean, you're right, there'll be thousands of cars. So Again, will that change anything in terms of the VMT for the Ravenswood? And that's all I want to know.
Sure. So we did contact Hexagon and ask them this question relative to the comment that was submitted in response to the public draft of the ISMND, and they did not have any changes to the analysis.
I'm just asking you to
Yeah.
Sure.
confirm.
So will there be a regional look at this too? I mean, the combination of things going on in El Camino, things going on down Middlefield and all that, that has to impact pass-through.
Yeah, so and when you read the ISMND, you'll see this theme raised in a couple of places that, you know, the regional housing needs allocation comes from ABAG and MTC, who are also driving, who are also guiding the regional growth strategy. So they're looking at regional growth relative to transportation. They're looking at regional growth relative to water management and other utilities. So all of those numbers tend to line up because they're all coming from this one organization and body that's charged by the state as a quasi-state regional agency to look at all of that.
Okay, so just jumping on down to VMT mitigation. So there's 4 tiers here, and they're talking about the fact that on Bay Road, it is a high VMT corridor, and consequently, it's going to require mitigation. And tier 1 and tier 2, I can understand, and you know, I have some questions about that. But tier 3 and tier 4, if this was a commercial environment, I would understand it, but I've never heard of anybody doing a TDM program for residential projects. And so I would, you know, so to some extent, this is just boilerplate, right? And so I don't think tier 4 applies to residential, but I'd like transportation to come back and confirm that, right? Which of these are we going to have to do, right?
Well, in
So
in
it's-
this case, the school, like, when you look at the schools, or the private schools, they have TDM programs to reduce the number of trips.
No,
and
I
go-
understand that.
Yeah.
I'm talking about a housing project.
Yeah, I know. I understand that, but what under tier 4, they're talking about school programs and
Yeah.
bike shares and things like that, that are along that corridor. But I agree with you. I mean, you know, the directive on this, from the state level
Yeah.
doesn't make,
Yeah, so I'd like
doesn't
some
make sense.
clarification in terms of what's really going to be required for the development of those 4 sites on Bay Road here.
So
Could I ask a question? Are you saying that the Parkline project, that they kind of get a free pass on traffic mitigation just because of their proximity to the train in El Camino? Because I didn't realize that.
it's not a free pass entirely, but they do have some reduction in trips because of their proximity to public transit, such as Caltrain. When we look at the analysis, that's what it's going to identify.
But what's it saying? Because everybody has a short enough walk to go there, everybody will do it.
Exactly, and that's effectively the direction by ABAG and MTC is to locate housing closer to public transit so that people are less reliant on their cars and can use the train to commute to the city, to commute to San Jose.
And what's that distance again? Is it a half a mile?
I believe it's
A
less
half
than
mile,
half a
Half
mile.
Yeah.
It's what?
It's generally a half mile, but I believe Parkline is less than a half a mile to Caltrain, yeah.
West End, yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting question because it is within a half mile.
So touching on the tier 1 through tier 4, those are, that serves as a menu for projects to pull from when they have to do, when they move forward with a development proposal. They are going to have to provide a transportation analysis that identifies that they have lowered the trips resulting from their project using any of the strategies through tier 1 through tier 4. Some cities, what they've done is they've created their own VMT program so that they can identify their own menu of options that they would like to see that aligns with their specific priorities. This is coming from, I believe, a ABAG selection that gives developers a set menu when a jurisdiction hasn't already crafted one.
So I can understand on Parkline how they potentially could do something like that. What I don't understand is how a developer for 999 Ringwood
Mhm.
would have, actually implement something like this
Mhm.
for,
Mhm.
14 units.
Right.
Or whatever the number is. And so I would like to see some more clarification on this in terms of how it's going to actually apply. I do understand what you just said in terms of the developer of that project will be the one responsible, but we're talking about 4 of the lot. So I'm interested in what's sort of the implication for those 4 lots.
Sure.
So,
And let me just also put out there so that you have a little bit of understanding of where your leverage comes into play here. If you have a strategy that you would like to add to the menu, I don't know necessarily if we can add it through the CEQA process. We can certainly look into that, but we might also be able to add it as a development standard or a requirement in the municipal code. So if there is something that's not here that you become aware of in, the next few weeks of, or you can charge staff to expand the menu of options for council's
yeah,
consideration.
I just think that particularly tier 3 and tier 4, that these are not something that an individual developer of a single lot. I mean,
Right. Yeah.
the whole Lindenwood neighborhood would like the school system to deal with their traffic problem. They can't get it done.
Mhm.
So an individual developer is not going to deal with the school system and get anything to change. So, so it's being realistic. But let's move on. So, Sally left, but one of the things I would like is an assessment of, so on tier 1, to encourage walking, clearly we'd have to, create sidewalks for people to walk on. So I'd like an assessment of, will a standard width sidewalk fit within the right of way in front of those 4 parcels? Or are we going to have to eliminate all the trees in order to do that? And so I don't know if it's Sally or if it's the bio, the bio consultants that would do that, but
Yeah.
I think we should know
Yeah.
that.
Yes. Sally probably would only give feedback to whomever's doing the assessment of what
Yeah,
the
so
setback. would
maybe
be.
the.
Yeah.
Can I touch on that?
Yeah.
So in the development standards, we have identified frontage improvements for pedestrian pathways in front of these sites. We do understand that that might result in the removal of trees, and so therefore we've also indicated that any sort of tree removal for a pedestrian pathway would have to comply with the town standards. That forces the developer to have to either create a meandering pathway that works around the trees or provide mitigation for the loss of the tree, whether it's through additional planting. Well, actually, I think the requirement is specifically additional planting. So they would have to re-landscape the path to replace those heritage trees.
I'm
Right.
not sure that that's actually
Well,
possible because
yeah.
it's a narrow right of way.
Go ahead and go through your items though,
Yeah,
so we get
yeah.
through them.
Okay. So there are 3, so what the traffic guys do is they went through and they analyzed sort of key intersections. But what they did not do is look at some of the potential problems. And I think there's 3. And so from my perspective, and so one of them is, so the 4 parcels on Bay Road, if they're fully developed, potentially could have 70+ cars trying to enter Bay Road during the morning commute hour.
And then turning left.
And then turning left. Well, actually turning right or left on Bay Road.
Yeah.
And the problem on Bay Road is during the morning commute hour, people are lining up, they're stacking up on Bay Road to turn right on Ringwood. And so can they even get into Bay Road? And so.
And then school time, school traffic's going down there.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm talking about.
yeah,
The morning
yeah,
at school,
yeah.
the parents are dropping out kids. And so they need to, I mean, I don't want to try to solution it, but they need to come back and I think address that. Can you even get out of those parcels during the morning commute hour because of stacking up right there at that intersection of Bay Road and Ringwood?
Keep going because I want to get your time in,
Yeah.
but I want to leave get people up here talking
Yeah,
too.
so I have the same question about Ravenswood. So in the case of Ravenswood, we have the 3 parcels there. The question is 60+ cars. Can they get out in the morning turning left when you have all of that traffic from SRI and Parkline?
And
And-
more coming.
And more, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And, or do they have to turn right? And if they have to turn right, then what's the impact on Marcuson
Mhm.
and then on Oak Grove? And then back to Middlefield or through Lindenwood. Oh, and the last one is, so 999 Ringwood corner lot, right? So conceptually, people can exit from Ringwood, from 999 Ringwood onto Ringwood Avenue. It's right in the path of everybody that's on Bay Road that's trying to turn right there. And then just beyond 999 Ringwood is Frederick, where people are also trying to get out
Right.
and turn left. And so they haven't really said anything about these problematic
Right.
intersections. Let's see, my last two. So for Tom, great diagrams on the non-egress windows in the whatever section it
Mhm.
is. But what's not covered is egress,
Ingress,
the diagram for egress windows.
and
I-
ingress for that matter, and into the property too, right?
Yeah, no, but I'm specifically talking about, he's talking about Sill Heights.
Okay, I
And
got it.
so I'm very concerned that we don't misset people's expectations. And so we need a diagram for the egress windows. You put one in here for the non-egress, but we need one for the egress. So so people understand what it is.
Right.
And the same thing, so again, these are in the responses. We have responses in here, and I'm concerned we're missetting expectations in a couple of ways. And so another one is on the screening. And so if the town arborist can tell us, that there are box trees available that will grow to 34 feet tall within a reasonable time frame and act as a screening, great, we should know that. I don't believe it. And so we shouldn't be telling people that we're going to have landscape screening of 3-story buildings if we don't know how it's going to be done. So
Yeah.
that's it for me.
Okay, cool. And I know from firsthand that next door to me, when they did it, it's like 2.5 stories in about 1.5 years, 2 years maybe. So it was pretty quick. It was quicker than I thought. But so I know there are trees available that'll
So
go.
we should have,
Yeah,
we should know what they are.
right.
I mean, I don't think redwoods.
No, it wasn't redwood. It wasn't redwood. All right, anyone else? There will be ongoing discussions individually and you'll be on 24-hour shift, Brittany, so. But, Bob, you have anything to go through before we go? All right, so, Tom, you were gonna do your section now, right?
I'm ready.
All right, go for it. Thanks for waiting.
Hi, Tom Ford again. Good to be back.
Thank you.
So if you had asked me what our presentation was going to be a week ago, I would have said, well, we'll just put up the zoning ordinance and scroll through it and let you stop me and ask questions. But then when we saw this, I saw the staff report and talked to Brittany about it. We wanted to focus on page 5. If you look at the third dark bullet, underneath that dark bullet on page 5, there's a series about 9 mini bullets. And I think what's briefly covered in the staff report, I want to expand on, because rather than just sitting here and talking about this ordinance or this standard and this standard and this standard,
All right,
wanted to
page
go-
5 where? I've got 9,000 page 5s in the stack.
staff report,
Okay,
the actual
All right.
report.
all right, good. Okay,
No, I still don't know what you're doing.
yeah,
I don't know what,
yeah,
we have attachments, huh?
yeah, we have attachments and,
It's just the main staff report that refers to all the attachments.
okay, so
Just move on.
this,
I'm
Yeah.
gonna move on.
this,
But actually I've captured them on the slide in
Okay.
front of you.
okay,
So, but my point is that I really wanted to expand on those pieces that are kind of laid out in the staff report, because it sort of points out that many of these standards are written iteratively and to work with other standards to try to achieve some of the goals and ideas that we heard in the workshops and the joint study session last year. So the 8 at the top are just general things that I want to go through. But I also want to point out the 2 at the bottom, lot coverage and parking requirements, are 2 items that don't exist anywhere in your code right now. You don't have commercial development and none of your residential or other zoning districts talk about lot coverage or parking requirements. So that's new, and I have a couple slides to talk about that. So the first is the housing element directed us to work with a 40-foot or 4-story maximum height. But we heard a lot from the community that they were very uncomfortable with that. If you'll remember some of the workshops, we talked about the large house. We talked about pitched roofs and things like that. So we started working with allowing the 40-foot height, but developing the concept of a midpoint, which would really be the controlling element. And so what the midpoint does is establishes a midpoint between the eave and the top, the ridge line, if you will. And there's a controlling element for the midpoint. The midpoint in the RM10 is 34 feet. And the standard, which is there at the bottom, 17XX030, specifically states that if you develop a flat roof, the top of your parapet will be considered the midpoint. So again, this is trying to not only incentivize a sloped roof, which we feel might be more indicative of the character of the town, but also if you come in and decide, no, I'm going to do a flat roof, then the absolute highest you can be is the top of the parapet, which is similar to the midpoint. Thanks. In response to many different kinds of comments that we heard about the setbacks, generally with regard to privacy, the issue of privacy and noise and sound and adjacencies, we took a 2-tiered approach. So there's a base setback that's established for RM10 and RM20, but when that base is a certain amount, for instance, here it's 20 feet as shown in the diagram. However, if there's an R1 adjacent property, then you have a little bit more. So there's a second tier that you actually have to adhere to for your side and rear setbacks. This does not apply to a parcel. If the R1 parcel has the overlay, then that doesn't count. It's an R1 parcel that will not ever, at least in today's planning, will never have the RM10 put to it. So for instance, where you have those, let's say 4 parcels next to each other, it wouldn't apply to them, but it would apply to their rear because they have R1 behind them.
Okay.
So again, it shows up in a couple of places, but primarily the setback, and the goal is to get that 2-tiered approach. Next.
Any analysis would say that even with that methodology on those lots, for example, the density would be appropriate for the zoning that we have?
I mean, could you build?
Yes, could you build?
Yes, we did some test fits. It all depends on the size of the unit, which we've discussed at previous meetings, but yes, between 10 and the density bonus, you get higher, but between 10 and 12 units, 13 units, you should be able to fit.
Okay.
Just quickly, that the setback changes, but your sidewall height is reduced also, but based on this drawing.
Correct, but also,
Which is a big deal.
Yeah, so I asked about the density, about hitting the density. You drop it to 21 feet, that means you're not going to get a full 2-story property, probably.
yeah, I think what we have here is I have on the right an RM10 diagram, I'm sorry, and on the left I have the RM20.
Yeah, okay, so the right side is probably the wrong one, right?
Correct.
Okay,
But if you see in the attachment 9, it's addressed in both the RM10 and the RM20, and they deal with the different heights.
okay, so let's get that one fixed for next time, because that, I don't see any way hitting a density bonus on the right side.
Just make sure I understand.
Yeah.
What's on the right side would be applicable in any of these miscellaneous lots that right now we're talking about making RM10.
Correct.
Okay.
I'm not clear.
And if they have an R1 adjacent.
Yeah, I understand.
Well, wait a minute. So I thought you said, so is that correct? Is the right side of the chart correct?
Yeah, my mistake is mixing an RM10 image on the right and an RM20 image
On the left.
on the
yes.
left.
So what we're saying is in the RM 10 image on the right is if, so how do you get a 3-story building in there?
Yeah, that's what I don't understand.
It's a pretty wide site, except for Oakwood.
Well, then there has to be a second setback, right?
So what you're looking at is the 30-foot minimum setback, then the maximum height at that plane, and then that plane increases at a 1-to-1 ratio. So you can add another story. It's just gonna have to be set back so that it fits within that angled plane. What you're seeing isn't the building itself. You're looking at the envelope of what the building can be within.
Okay. Well, I
And the
don't-
reason, and again, I apologize, I'm mixing RM10 and RM20 here. But on the right, RM10, we heard a lot from those meetings that trying to instill that step back, that upper level step back at either 2 stories or 21 feet, whichever is less. So that's why once you get to 2 stories or 21 feet, you need to step back additional. You still have the 40-foot height limit that you can go up to, but you need to step back at a ratio of 1-to-1 or 45 degrees.
Okay, we'll need more clarification on that, I think. That still
Yeah.
doesn't, that's still, I'd have to see how that actually allows a builder to develop appropriately.
Let me try this. So again, the diagram on the right, so we would, if we were building a 3-story flat roof building, the height of the parapet, maximum height is 34 feet. So we go across here until we get up to 34 feet on this 1-to-1 line. And that's whatever that is, that's the setback is. And that's a side and rear and front setback.
Not the front, but
Oh,
the
not
side and the rear.
The side and the rear, okay.
Okay, and then, so they could theoretically have a lower section in front with a higher section attached behind. Okay. That, I
Well,
get
or they
it.
just, you
Yeah.
know, the walls
Or
right
they,
there.
yeah, or they step it back even farther, right?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll open in a minute. But this one, let's get some more clarification on this, and so we don't have any questions when we come back for the final round, all right?
Mhm.
So, because this one will create questions with us, and so it'll definitely create more. And we might need another couple of examples of like building examples to show what that looks like.
And I would just suggest too, I mean, it's wasting paper, but I would not put RM10 and
Yeah.
RM20 and 40 on the same
Right.
page.
I would, correct.
No, they're not. That's why I said this is my mistake in the slideshow.
All right,
If you go look at attachment 9, this didn't happen.
all right, good.
RM10 is handled as one section, RM20
All right, let's keep it that
happens
way
as its
on the
own
slides
section.
then too. All right, next slide. Or are you done with that one?
Yeah, next. So this is again, one of the new standards that new to Atherton, lot coverage. What we've done here is we've established a maximum coverage for buildings and a maximum coverage for impervious surfaces. But in aggregate, you have to be even less than those, your total has to be less than the 2 cumulative amounts. So you can go up to 40% with building, including accessory buildings or garages. And you can go up to 20% with paved or impervious materials. But the total of those 2 items can only go up to 50% of the gross lot.
So, so Tom, the question is what's the assumption on the square footage of these units?
We did test fits at between 18 and 2,000, 1,800 and 2,000,
That's not bad. That's
which
pretty good.
makes most
Right. very cool.
architects of affordable housing blush. They think more along the lines of 900 to 1,000 square foot per
Yeah,
unit.
not for market
Right,
conforming.
market rate. I think you were the person at one of our meetings that was talking about 22 and,
Right.
Right.
and 2,200.
Yeah, and this is back to the earlier conversation about what is the, who's the resident for these units? And so these units are going to be moderate income to market conforming, right? And so they're not the low income or the,
Unless there's some kind of incentive plan that is attached to them. I mean,
Yeah.
That
yeah,
could be.
Well-
At $1 million an acre or $2 million per acre, the only way we had affordable housing is having some kind of incentive to reduce the,
no, I understand, but right now we're saying it goes back to table 2. Low income and very low income is on
Yeah.
the school sites,
right,
not this.
right.
And so the 2,000 from my perspective is minimum for this.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, next.
I think you'd make a case for 1,700 square foot, 2-bedroom being okay.
well, it's because you can do 3 stories.
Right,
So,
right.
So next, I want to talk about, we use floor area ratio to incentivize a few things. So the maximum floor area ratio is 50%. However, if someone comes in and designs a building with a pitched roof, they're granted an additional 5%. If that pitched roof creates a livable space, such as you see in the top floor of this building on the left, they can get 5% additional FAR. Again, this is to try to create building forms that are more traditional architecture, if you will, try to lower the perceived mass of the building and utilize that upper floor with architectural features such as dormers or wings or Ls or gables. The other way we use floor area to ratio incentive is for a project that puts all of its parking entirely below grade. We give them another 5%. We grant 5% of FAR, and that's applied to any place in the building, the first floor or the upper levels. So we grant. So we didn't, to jump ahead to parking, a lot of people in your community wanted us to demand or write a standard that said all parking must be underground. We knew HCD would just not go for that. So what we did is try to incentivize it and give them extra FAR for putting it underground.
yeah,
Right.
the one,
Go
sorry,
ahead.
but the one thing I would say about the underground parking, I think that's fine for resident cars, but visitor guest parking, I don't agree with that. Because the problem is this impervious coverage and the question of how you're going to handle all of the stormwater runoff. And the advantage of surface parking for guests is you don't necessarily it doesn't necessarily have to be impervious. And so,
Yeah. Okay, so the other question I have from a planning change perspective, so these could be good starting points. And then 2 years in, we find out that it didn't create the outcome we expected. How hard is it to change this in the plan without going through a CEQA and everything else if we wanted to dial them back a little bit or change them?
That is a great question, because it helps me drive home this point about not putting planning code modifications or planning code requirements in the general plan. We can come back at any point and modify the zoning code. It does mean we have to go to the planning commission, and then it's at least 2 hearings at the city council because it's an introduction and potentially first reading combined and then second reading. And that's typically the fastest you'll see the city council has approved any sort of zoning code or municipal code amendments. When you do a general plan amendment, you're actually limited annually to, I think, 4 amendments per year.
Right.
So
That's
we
right.
try not to do those as much because you don't want to get in a situation where you need to make an amendment and you've used them all.
Right.
So you don't see that frequently. So
That's
thanks.
why I asked about this, because I know that one scenario is really painful. Okay, that's good. All right, just as long as we have the flexibility, because we know these are all estimates about the outcomes, and the creativity or, misuse of these standards will be discovered over the first couple of years or maybe 3 years.
well, I'm going to check Tom's math too.
Yeah, I know. Okay, keep going.
So can I just ask a question, Commissioner Bryant? Are you asking us, at least individually, and maybe others want to agree, that we shouldn't stipulate that all parking has to be underground to get this 5% credit, or just the resident on-site parking, does not apply to guest parking.
So before we made that decision, I'd want to have this conversation about impervious coverage. If we said visitor parking also has to be underground, we're giving up an opportunity. If you're doing underground parking, that whole area is impervious, right? Whereas if you have surface parking for the visitors, it doesn't necessarily have to be impervious. We have more options. The driveway will be impervious, but the actual parking space could actually be permeable. And so
I was thinking underground parking would be actually under the building, so it wouldn't be counting anyway.
Yeah,
Well, it may be. I don't know that that's true.
yeah.
I mean.
You're just
when
saying
you
an
talk-
underground.
When you talk about guest parking, that's a lot of cars.
It could
That's why I'm
be.
saying the math's got to get checked.
It could be. I mean, you could have guest parking in 4 slots. I mean, that's, down in LA, you get guest parking, you get 3 spots and the rest of the time you're wandering around trying to find a parking spot.
But where are they going to park?
Yeah, well, that's the whole problem
You're
with
not
a
going to
lot of
park
this.
on Bay or.
Yeah, well, when you get to the Menlo Park, when Menlo Park developments, you're gonna have a situation where they're only gonna put one slot for each property and say, good luck, guys, for all the rest of you trying to find a spot. Back when I was on the planning commission in a different place, when we were doing the BART
Yeah.
stations, they said, thou shalt have one parking, and all it did is spread parking all the way through the neighborhood. So, that's why this regional look that you're talking about is really important. So just keep in mind that we want to know not only what our standard is, but what it looks like when you have a standard and what that would create. All right. So be thinking about that. And now that you know specific lots, let's see some examples of what that means on a specific lot. Because I think it's really important that we, one, get something that's accepted by the state. 2, get something that's accepted. Actually, I think it's number 1, accepted by the community. And then 3, get something that's actually buildable so that we will be in compliance in 5 to 10 years.
And in that regard, so I have a suggestion about that. So I agree with you about that. And my suggestion is there's a handful of architectural firms that are constantly doing projects here in Atherton. We should go to them and ask them to do a design charrette on these standards and come in and present it to us and at no charge to the town.
Yeah.
And I'm sure they'd be happy to do it,
Just think about that, because we want to comply. We want it to be good, and we want it to be done. It has to be, because otherwise they'll come back and they'll say, yeah, you thought it was a good plan, but it stinks, so change it, or we're going to come over and take it over. And so the objective here is to make something that's buildable that fits the community. All right, so let's do some scenarios to find out what that looks like.
However, I think in answer to your question, that word all should be removed. You should, having 3 or 4 parking spaces above ground is not an aberration in the town of Atherton.
Right.
Sure. I agree.
Yeah, my property has 27 spots. Do that in a problem. All right.
Okay, design for privacy. I think Commissioner Bryant already referred to this particular drawing in this context. So there's a series of different things. You can see a bunch of different places and standards that are referenced in the lower right, but a number of different things that we tried to do. So the setbacks and what's allowed and what's not allowed. So to reduce noise, we mentioned that the pools, kitchen area, outdoor kitchens and play areas are not allowed in the setback area. And we also want to point out that those continue to be discretionary items. So even if someone wants to put any one of those items outside the setback on their parcel, it's still a discretionary review item to build a pool, to build an outdoor kitchen, or a play area.
Just Town Planner Brittany Bendix jumping in here. Tom is saying that it's still a requirement for discretionary review. It's not currently a requirement for discretionary review. I want to be very clear about that. On single family homes, there are some cases where, yes, it's triggered like a variance, or sometimes sports courts in certain locations will trigger a special structures permit. What we're saying here is that it's not allowed in the setback area. If a developer wants to pursue it, it needs a planning commission hearing.
Okay, that way we control what kind of noise there is and what kind of impact there is to the neighbors.
Well, and the neighbors have an opportunity to directly respond to that, and
Right.
staff can have the developer put forward their argument, and there's a public process for it that doesn't actually impede housing development, right? So it's setting the standard for housing to get built, maintaining that ministerial aspect of it. But if you want certain amenities, you have to go through a discretionary and local process to get them.
Yes, so I think we lose sight of the fact that particularly if it's for sale housing, for those, for 4 lots on Bay Road, that would be, how many voters would that be? They're going to have a say about that. I mean, they become Atherton's residents and they're going to have a say about it. And there's only 4 residents behind them, and there'll be, 10 times that many on the other side of the fence. And so they're going to have a view about that pool and the setback. So I think
Well,
we just need to keep that in
Yeah,
mind.
yeah, right. I mean, the reality, like we said, it's a matter of how it actually plays out.
Yeah.
Here's just over, Bill. I want to start the public comment section at 8 o'clock. So, Tom, wherever you
Why don't
are.
I wrap this up?
Yeah, okay,
Well,
good.
Let me say one more thing about this diagram. So what I want to see on this diagram is a 3-story version of this diagram. And I want to see showing the sill height for the egress windows, so that people understand that someone standing at a 44-inch high sill height are looking right down on their yard, right? Because that's what it is. I don't
Keep
want
in
to
mind,
set-
in most cases, the 3rd story would have a mandatory
Setback.
setback, depending on how close the.
Well, that's
the-
okay, show
yeah,
that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure,
As a sight line, but it's 30 feet away.
Sure.
Or whatever it is.
yeah, we showed some
and on the-
diagrams like that in the workshop. It starts to be, especially
We
with
need to show
setbacks
that
of
so
both
we're not
properties, it starts
missetting
to be a
expectations.
considerable distance.
These buildings are going to look down on people, neighboring sites. backyards.
Potentially, yeah,
Yeah.
depending on which way the windows go. Tom, but what are we going to finish with?
I'll finish right now.
Okay,
What's the next one? So design for privacy, we prioritize pedestrian, next slide, please. Pedestrian environment through a series of different standards, just to try to reinforce the activity and scale. Next. We tried to do in a number of different places, limiting the impact of vehicles on the environment, such as the queuing distance. If you put in a gate, queuing distance to the back of the sidewalk. All parking must be either garaged or below grade, meaning in a garage, we include a carport, but it can't just, the resident parking can't just be surface. Next. And a series of things that deal with building mass and trying to break up the building so that you don't have large frontages on the public realm. Next. We use the ABAG guidance. ABAG in April published the regional objective standards that they're inviting everyone to use to their discretion. So we took a lot of the residential opening guidance from them, particular to the types of buildings that we would like to encourage in the RM10 and RM20. Next. And then, like I said, parking requirements are new to Atherton. And so both the RM10 and the RM20 have them for residents and guests. And like I talked about earlier, there's some talk about incentivizing underground parking. So I'll leave it at there,
right.
Chairman Lane.
So let's in the next month, let's, spend time with staff in terms of comments or questions or ideas or objections, whatever, so that when we come back here next month, we're ready to stay on path in terms of getting things to the town council, because we need to get this, get something that the state buys. All right, any other questions then? Because I'm gonna open up the public comment section. Let me see, can you take that off so I can see how many people are online? All right. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'll open up the public comment, and I'm gonna go with a couple people in the room first, and then we'll go through a couple people online and then come back to the room back and forth. So if you're going to be online, there's a way for you to choose a raised hand on your screen. So I'll be watching for that on the screen I have. And let's go ahead and open up the public comment section in the room here. Anyone like to speak? All right, come on up. Yeah, all right. And I'm going to try to keep things to around 3 minutes. And if there's beyond that, and there's a lot more, then we got another month for you to talk to staff and members of the commission. So go ahead.
Most of you know me. I'm Carol Flaherty.
Yeah.
I own a couple of houses in Atherton. But I'm here tonight for the Atherton Housing Coalition. Jeff Morris was here earlier. He had to leave. So I'll make comments for both of us. There's a lot of good in this document. And as a builder, I can appreciate the thought that went into these standards. It's 1,062 pages.
I know.
It is mind-boggling. I read 100 of them.
Oh.
But here's the problem. I'm going to talk as a resident. We have come to these meetings for 1 year.
Right.
There have been 2 meetings with over 200, almost 300 people at them. People I never thought would be at a city council meeting. The Housing Coalition has had a ton of one-on-one meetings with council members. And in those meetings, we were told, don't worry, take the perimeter properties, Bay, Ravenswood, Ringwood, and we'll limit the multifamily to that. We won't go into the heart of Atherton. And we'll go ahead and we'll have a plan based on ADUs, and we'll have 300 and some multifamily units, and that'll be okay. But that's not what this plan says. We're pretty surprised to find Faxon and Polhemus and Monte Vista back in the plan in 280 some additional units. If I take just Sacred Heart and Menlo School, there are 65 units there in 2 blocks. There are 42 houses down Valparaiso that are on the Menlo Park side between El Camino and Alameda. In 2 blocks, we're going to have 1.5 times the housing of the entire street. You can't even get down Valparaiso at 8:30 in the morning or get onto it or at 3:30 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and you can't get through the light at University Avenue. I cannot in my wildest dreams imagine 65 more units. And this plan has to have some reality. There's 126, I think, units planned for Menlo College who doesn't have a penny to pay for them and wants Atherton to fund it. And there's no appetite for that. So we have 280 some units that I think are highly questionable. At what point do we get real? 16 units on Faxon, one of the most expensive streets in the entire city, and Monte Vista. Now you're in the heart. And you would have at Menlo College 2 4-story buildings that face El Camino. That opens up the entirety of El Camino to be considered at some point down the road. And now you start to hit Isabella, Alejandro, Atherton Avenue, Tuscaloosa, and Almondral. And what happens to the property values of the homes that are there? And then we were told, don't worry, we're not going to have more than 2-story multifamily. Now we have overlays of 4 stories. And what happens to the Lindenwood people that are backing up to Ravenswood, and they have a 4-story building, whether it has different heights or not, it's still 4 stories, it's still 40 feet and 48 feet over at Menlo College. What happens to their property values? They're trashed. If they can even sell their properties, they're trashed. So not only is Oakwood trashed, now we have Lindenwood trashed. We're going to provide comment page by page because there's no way to do it in 3 minutes. But this is not what the city council agreed to and not what they told us in one-on-one meetings. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, well, for what it's worth, there are so many things about this that, as I've mentioned before, I've been on 3 different planning commissions in 12 years on this one. And in any of those previous planning commissions, if I was given these rules to go by, I would have been thrown off. If I had implemented these rules in any other planning commission, I would have been thrown off the planning commission. The state mandates on this are just not good. I mean, don't worry about traffic. Don't worry about the trees. Don't worry about the list of things that go in this law are not good planning. All right. So the worst planning we can do, though, is not have a plan, as I've talked about before, because if we don't control the at least an attempt to come up with an answer that meets the state while they digest all this the reality of this law, they'll come in and do it for us, and that won't be pretty. If you thought these outcomes are bad, wait until they would come in and just say, okay, all of El Camino, all of Bay Road, all of Marsh, you know, by the way, the front part of Middlefield has a bus line on it, so just go down that one. So we're in a very delicate process here of trying to get passed by the state, keep the community that we design we like, and also ADU the heck out of this place so that ADUs help us get to the point of the number so that we can get it of a style that we can live with. So I definitely understand your comments. So it's just a matter of I know what we don't want, and we don't want this law. All right. I know what we don't want in terms of damage to the nature of the community. And how do we balance that with compliance? That's what this whole 2-year process, 3-year process has been. Go ahead, next.
Just before you do, Carol, I understand your comments, and obviously a great number of people in the community agree with much of what you said. I don't know what was said in these one-on-one meetings, but those are one-on-one meetings where candidates, if you will, want to be friends with everybody. And I know them all well. What they say in one-on-one meetings is not what's going to happen.
Not always, anyway. And sometimes they're forced into other decisions. Go ahead.
Thank you. Tom Georgie, Redwood City resident, 425 East Oakwood Boulevard, immediately adjacent to 23 Oakwood, which is the only property that really should be even discussed. All this discussion on Bay Road and Ravenswood is all theoretical. I think it would actually even make sense what you're saying is if you were to do something there and El Camino and these major thoroughfares, instead of wedging multifamily development into a narrow single family lot, because I'm looking at these standards and I know it's tough, and they're doing gymnastics to fit this. I'd be real curious to see what these standards look like, to your point, Mr. Bryant, on Oakwood, because it's a narrow lot. It's 139.98 feet wide, which is the minimum in the chart for setback width. So that means that the R1 adjacent setback on the side is 25 feet.
That's what I thought.
It's 25 feet on Oakwood. That's my bedroom window, 25 feet away. And so then I'm looking at this diagram, and it's 21 feet high at 25 feet, okay? But then on a 1-to-1, we can go up, so up to 34. So that means 13 feet back. So that means that 38 feet, and 38 feet it's funny because right now the side setback for that size lot is 38 based on a sliding scale. But now that new reduced dimension is going to be at, so if you take 25 plus 13, which is that 1-to-1 to get up to the max, that means I got 34 feet at 38 feet away from my bedroom window. I could be looking right down into my window. So goes to expectations, what you're talking about. This is just a screaming red flag that Oakwood is a horribly located project based on it being a narrow rectangular lot. And whatever deal that Widmer made with Arata in their back room should be reconsidered. And you guys, I mean, whatever recommendations come out of this, Oakwood is clearly ill-situated to take multifamily. Thank you for your
Thank you.
time.
Thank you. All right, is there anybody online that's looking to speak at this point? I'm not seeing any hands. I'm not seeing people off mute. All right, well, send somebody come off of mute and say your name online. David or Amanda or Julia, Rajan, Lisa. I mean, I'm looking at names here and I'm not seeing anybody come off. All right, then I'll go with somebody else in the room.
Thank you very much. I'm Kelly Martin at 580 Middlefield Road, and my husband Woodson is here as well. And we directly adjoin the properties on Ravenswood. And I'm going to note that I feel that we are also very much the heart of Atherton on the perimeter, or I'm not sure how you referred to it. But in our view, this particular part of the heart of Atherton is also real. We know that you are getting real. We know that we have a real future ahead of us at our property. And we appreciate the work that the council, the commission, the staff have been doing to try to ameliorate the situation that we find ourselves in. And potentially the entire town finds themselves in, not just the people on the perimeter. So I have some specific questions, and perhaps we can comment on it through email and thank you very much, Brittany, for clarifying the process. That's really helpful. I will ask that, can we not prohibit sport courts, pools, playgrounds? That's something that I think that we would ask ourselves, like, can we not prohibit that in the zoning requirements? Not sure it's required in these lots, with these size of developments, but that's something that we feel pretty strongly about. And someone made the point about the haggling that could come later over a permit process. Also would like to talk about, I had a question about something in the amendment about permitting low barrier navigation centers on these R10 sites. What does that mean?
Go ahead. Go ahead and answer that.
Actually, Asher, if you're there, do you want to answer that? The requirement for low barrier navigation centers? This is my colleague, Asher Cohen, who has been working on the housing element revisions specifically.
Thank you, Brittany. Thank you, commissioners. So the requirement for a low barrier navigation center, it comes from the state. They have to be required anywhere where multifamily housing is allowed. And it's basically
What's the translation of that phrase?
Yeah. It's I'm trying to think. It's almost like a resource center, like a community center in a lot of ways, for people experiencing homelessness, not necessarily a place to stay overnight, but a place to kind of, the idea is there would be someone working there or some sort of resources, either whether it's directed to a shelter, mental health services, things
So
like
how does
that.
that affect the properties we're talking about?
Well, so let me jump in for a second. So Asher, in my experience, what you're alluding to is resource centers for, as you said, possibly homeless people, but also for people that low income and very low income individuals or extremely low income individuals that need community support for any number of reasons. And so what you see in other communities is housing projects that are really geared toward very low or extremely low individuals typically include on site this resource center. That's what you're talking about, I think, Asher.
None of the projects we have are set up to have that right now. Is that right, Azure?
No, but there's a requirement.
So there's a requirement to have that, and even on the 10s and 14s we have? How does that actually work?
Half of
There's
it-
a requirement. Sorry, there's a
ahead.
requirement that it's allowed. The developer still have, or the property owner would still have to be somebody who's interested in it, but it can't be
It can't be
Um,
categorically denied.
thank you. That's a good way to
Okay.
put it.
It doesn't have to be promoted, but it has to be allowed if somebody says, hey, I'd like to do this.
Well, and again, typically what happens is for extremely low income, those are going to be nonprofit housing.
Right, right. It's like the ones on El Camino down. Yeah,
Building it
right.
and operating it.
Right,
And that's what we're talking about for the school sites.
right. All right, very good.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. I see in the language that is permitted on any parcel within the multifamily overlay.
Yeah, and it's permitted because it's required by the state.
Okay. And then just lastly, I share your concerns about the traffic impact on Ravenswood and Middlefield and at that intersection. And I don't know whether in the zoning requirements, the driveway and the access to these sites could be specified and ameliorated. Just, I
Right.
think it's with the property across the street, it could be really tricky.
Right.
So on this, so again, it's not Atherton's responsibility to assess, it should be on, right?
Yeah.
To assess the impact of SRI and Parkline, but we are going to respond. And the developers of Parkline and SRI are going to have to potentially do any number of activities in terms of Ravenswood and that intersection at Ravenswood, Ringwood, and Middlefield. So we're waiting to see what, but there's going to be a lot of cars.
Well, and on top of that, there's farther down, I mean, on the cut through by the park, when people go from El Camino back over to Middlefield, and everybody sits there and tries to go left to get onto Marsh Road,
Right.
that's going to have to be a stoplight. There's all this stuff, and then down here on Fair Oaks, where people try to get out and go left or go right, and it's 1 block away from Marsh. I mean, it's all that stuff's going to get nailed by all the additional traffic.
So just in parting, I just hope that we can continue to move forward in good faith to try to work out a solution for all the current residents,
Yeah.
all parts of Atherton and future residents, which is what we've been asked to do.
Right.
So
I
thank
agree.
you.
I totally agree with you. You got to land on our feet somehow with rules that don't let you land on your feet. Go ahead.
Thank you all. My name is Sen. I live in I'm the homeowner in, I might be the unique position here because I'm not one of the neighbors of the houses that are impacted. I'm one of the homeowner in one of the RM10 housing unit. And my point, the reason why I want to step forward is that me and my wife I've been with my wife Julia, who is also online, have been in communication with Brittany and I believe Rick Digota as well. That the fact that I understand all the neighbors' concerns, but also in order for developers to be incentivized to actually build, all of those requirements are making it less incentivized.
Right.
And I've talked to all of my neighbors. Guess what? Right now, I see maybe like a few of the unit, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, besides the Circus Club and the Cold Water one. Majority of them won't even consider selling or developing. I guess we're talking about potentially designing like thousands of pages of document for 1 or 2 homeowner that are willing to entertain the consideration to actually develop their beloved primary residence into a multifamily. Guess the only reason for doing that is there's economic incentives. And all of those potentially setback requirement and all of those things are actually making it really, really hard for me. We actually did go out and hired architect to draw out, because some of the nuances are making it really, really difficult to actually build, for example, 9 properties. And I agree with Mr. Brian's point, is that I think Tom did great work, all the amazing like months of work going into this, but maybe worthwhile to talk to the actual developer and see if it actually makes sense
Right.
to be economically incentivized to even do this. Otherwise, I mean, what are we doing? Like, are we just doing like a multi-housing theater here, right? Like,
Right.
I hope that's not what we are trying to do here.
Yeah, we're definitely not, we can't afford to do that, because if we don't hit our numbers, then it gets taken away from us again. So it's one of those things, but yes, we have to get a plan that's approved, and we have to have a plan that has the numbers building in the way that it's believable that we'll achieve them. And then, and so it has to be, at the end of 10 years, it has to be a reality. Actually, at the end of 5 years, it has to look like a reality. Otherwise, they'll come in and change everything. So if you've got an architect for Tom, that can get a hold of Tom and show what he drew out, that might save some time too, just in terms of seeing the plans they already did.
Yeah, I think some of these privacy concerns and all of these things can be, my point is that make it less stringent and work with the developer to actually make it attractive for the developer to make it. Otherwise, it's gonna be taken to the state.
Right.
And go back to Mr. Brian's point, you're thinking potentially there's 70 plus cars that are gonna go onto Bay Road. I know for a fact, through talking to the neighbors, less than half of these property will actually be developing, like in the next 10, 20 years.
Right.
So considering, I would urge to not design for the maximum, but design for the actual reality of people actually are willing to going for it.
Right. Thank you. Thank you. Yes.
So we have a comment from Fadi Mikhalian.
Okay.
We'll ask her to unmute. And if you're joining us online, please feel free to direct message me here on the chat, and I'll be able to introduce you and unmute you. And with that, I'll ask to unmute Fadi.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Fadi. We can hear you. Just make sure you're close to your mic.
Good afternoon, Chairman Lane, or good evening. I believe that our raison d'etre, the raison d'etre of this commission is really based on the principle of good neighborhood. Is that correct?
Based on the principle of what?
Of good neighborhood. We're trying to
Yes,
make.
absolutely. There's no doubt about that.
I also noticed that
He just
all
did.
the single family to be rezoned are on the periphery of Atherton. Is that correct?
I didn't understand the last sentence. What did you say?
All the single family to be rezoned are on the periphery of Atherton. None of them are in the heart of Atherton. They're all on the periphery of Atherton.
Yes, but right now, the plan that the town council has approved designates spots that are on the peripheral, right?
The other part that I noticed is that all access road to at least the 999 Ringwood Avenue and the Ravenswood Avenue are not in the jurisdiction and are not in Atherton. They're really in Menlo Avenue and Menlo Park and other property in other towns.
Except through Meadowfield Road was
That's
another
good.
way in, yeah.
Except for Middlefield Road. Yeah, but essentially if you go to Bayview or Ringwood Avenue, they both are not part of Menlo Atherton. They're part of Menlo Park. So
Correct.
shouldn't the city of Menlo Park and the city of Redwood City for the and also the property, there is a part that's unincorporated, be part of this commission? Shouldn't they be involved in this decision? I mean, we're based on good neighborhood.
Yeah.
The neighbors of those properties are not Atherton, are not in Atherton. They're using streets that are not Atherton streets. They're using Menlo Park Street, and therefore I believe that in order to stick to our principles of good neighborhood, maybe we should involve in those decisions in this commission the cities of Redwood City and the cities of Menlo Park, and a representation of the unincorporated part of Menlo Park that's just next to those properties that were selected.
We get feedback. Brittany,
Yeah, I do want to point out that the notification for this meeting was sent to all residents that are within 500 feet of Atherton. And the RENA allocation is an obligation shared by all the jurisdictions within the Bay Area. Menlo Park had a housing element that was certified and adopted. I believe Redwood Cities has been certified and adopted. And so this is a standard practice now that all jurisdictions are going through, and residents within that area have been included.
Yeah, and we just heard from Redwood City
Right.
residents just before this.
But I think the point that I was trying to make is not that they should be just invited. They should be part of the decision process. That's my point, which is they should be part of the commission. That commission should be enlarged to include the city of Menlo Park and the city of Redwood City because of the location, of the choice of the location of those, of the rezoning single family units.
I think, Fadi, that there's 2 points that ought to be made here. One is that ABAG is the regional association that, in fact, and the Metropolitan Transportation Authority, they are responsible for pulling together a regional traffic plan, transportation plan, and they're working on that. And so if we were trying to collaborate in some way with Menlo Park is getting ready to approve Parkline and SRI at a minimum, and that's thousands of cars that are going to be coming in and out of there. So that sort of cuts both ways. I mean, that's each town, each community's got to.
Yeah, so Fadi, your point's well taken, but there and so the difficulty of this whole thing is that each one of those cities is trying to make sure that they don't get the state to help them. So they're rushing through and getting approval for things, and they're saying, "Well, we made it. We got ours." So and so we walk up and say, "Hey, we've got 95 cars to talk about," and they say, "You think you've got a problem? Look at our problem." And so they one of the things about Atherton that's unique is that our problem sounds big to us, and it sounds like rounding error to everybody around us. And so when we come in and say, "Hey, we've got to come up with 345 units," they come in and say, "Okay, that's one development for us. So what are you talking about?" So it's
I think
the scale of their interest is not. They don't really. They don't think in terms of the difficulty of maintaining the type of neighborhoods that we maintain here. So,
I understand. I think the point that I'm trying to make is not really the fact that we need to incorporate them, but the fact that the choice of the location that we made to rezone single family unit to multifamily unit is the key point that I'm trying to make, which is we need to reconsider that if we don't want to involve everybody else. If we don't want to involve everybody else, if they were not in the periphery, in the middle, I'd say you don't need to involve anyone. But as at the moment where you choose something at the periphery, you have the obligation as if you follow a good principle neighborhood to involve in your decision the other people who are impacted by them.
Yeah, and
choose them inside. Choose the facility inside Atherton. I'd have no problem with it. But I think it's the choice at the periphery that really bothered me. And surprisingly, all of them are at the periphery. There isn't a single side that's inside Atherton.
Yeah, well, we're operating on the direction of the town council who chose those specific locations. So from a planning perspective, it's given back to us and say, okay, now that we've chosen these spots, what are the requirements for these spots? So your comment specifically would be a good one for the upcoming town council session, because they decided which spots to use. We made some recommendations. They chose some different ones, and so they came back to us and say, okay, these are the spots. Now, what do you want to do with them, or what would you recommend doing with them? And then they'll say, well, we take your recommendations from all the inputs we have, and this is what we decide.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. All right. Anybody else online?
Caroline, can I just add one point here?
Yes.
And that is that ABAG does have officers that are representative of different county and local jurisdictions.
Yes.
So it is comprised of representation of all of these different jurisdictions.
Yeah, we have council people assigned to that, as well as staff, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, I don't see anybody online, so go ahead, come on up.
Council members, I appreciate all the effort you've put in here, and Brittany, I hope you've done yeoman labor on this. But the town of Atherton, the town council has set forth specific goals, objectives, and policies that they had wanted to have integrated into the 2023-2031 element. If you look at the 4 homes, Bay Road and Ringwood, they don't hit any. They don't even come close to hitting the goals and policies that have been set forth by the town. The council has specifically, and let me just highlight a couple of them that I think are germane to this issue. Policy LU 1.5. Proposals to replace existing homes shall adhere to the following design criteria. Town allows only where not significant degradation of established levels of privacy.
Yeah.
Right now, Lindenwood, Frederick Avenue has 1-story homes. That's it. Also on Bay Road and Ringwood are 1-story homes. They're set back 50 feet at least, 70 feet on the sides. That is what is privacy. That's what exists. That's what we bought. That's what we live for. And that's what we expect to have. And that's what the town council has directed to be undertaken here. That's not happening when you have a 40-foot residence some 35 feet away. They're looking into our bedrooms. They're looking into our backyards. The issue of having 10 families or potentially more sitting that close with all of their activities makes it a hellhole, excuse me. But it's unlivable to be there and have that many people coming and going. We already have noise levels on the street that are coming out to close to the maximum noise levels allowed, 60 dBs. You add on the noise and consternation that's going on with 10 families there, it's unlivable. When we're in the backyard, I'm not much further than you and I are here a little bit, but the talking, we'll hear them talking, 10 families talking back there. Who would want to live in that kind of a situation? Nobody. We're going to screen it off. Foliage isn't going to stop that. Foliage isn't going to stop somebody who's 10 families looking down in your backyard. This is stealing our lives. That's what's happening.
All I can tell you is the role of the planning commission is to come up with rules of the designated space that the state has mandated so that the city council chose certain properties. We're trying to limit those impacts, and we're trying to do it and there's 2 things that are going to mitigate it. First of all, whether or not the current property owner wants to do it, which has been brought up. Second is how we try to make sure that the compliance with the state regulations happens in such a way that it minimizes the impact on all the residents. And that's what the town councils try to do by the selection of the properties. And it's what we're trying to do with regulations about height and setbacks. So I can understand the frustration for sure, because, ever since I've heard about this, I've been saying the same thing. This is bad planning mandated by the state. But it's get worse if we don't take control of it.
Eric, I understand that, and I also appreciate and hope that you also listen to what the city council has asked us to do, which is to make it a residential area that is still in the bucolic nature that it was before.
Right.
You're not going to bastardize our properties and as Carol
Speak this
says-
way. Talk to us, not the crowd. Right.
As Carol said, and take away several millions of dollars in each property. They're going to be worthless.
Right. Thank you.
And you're going to go ahead and do that by making these homes there? Let me just point out a couple of deficiencies, if I might, in the response. And I appreciate this, the town putting in a response to our letter. But let me tell you a couple of the issues I don't think were addressed in those responses. First, with my issue was the aesthetics. You're looking at a 26,000 square foot house on these 40,000 square foot lots. There
We lost your mic.
are no houses in Lindenwood that are half or most of them are a fifth of that size. Across the street in Menlo Park, they're 1,500 square foot homes. They'll stuck out like a sore thumb. It is not consistent with what is being built there now. That's our first issue, that they're going to be just, as I said in my letter, pumpkin in a strawberry patch. They look awful. They don't belong there. They also said that there are multiple dwellings on Bay Road. They're 3/4 of a mile away from these homes. And they are at the intersection of Bay and the freeway. They may be very appropriate right there on the freeway where no one else wants to live. But they're not having any relationship to this area where these are proposed. The existing screening structures they talk about are fine for a single family dwelling. They're not made for 10 families and to screen 10 families on a third floor or even on a second floor, or all the noise and accoutrements that go along with daily living there. They're just not intended for that purpose. The screening elements, we are going to be inundated with every activity that goes on. If you put a pool back there, which I understand isn't supposed to happen unless somebody says, hey, I really want a pool and we want to get this built, so we'll give you a pool.
Well, if we
Can you
approve it,
imagine 10 families around that
Oh,
pool, right
that-
adjacent to your backyard?
We've spent a lot of time talking about that. I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up, but we have got another month of conversations with
Well-
staff and whatever. So
Okay, traffic, obviously, Tom, I think you brought up a very, very good idea on the traffic and the issue that arises there. There's no parking. They don't address off-street parking in this at all, or on-street parking, I'm sorry. So, I mean, I'll write another letter of follow-up where there's a deficiency in this, but I hope you understand, I've spoken with all but one of the people on Frederick Avenue. Every one of them is adamantly opposed
I
to this
understand.
production,
We've
to
heard-
this
we've heard
work.
from-
The streets is going to be here in force at the town council meeting. And we'll let everybody know, we were not even an idea in anybody's brain when they had the first proposals. And that's why no one showed up and was not granted the
public comment on.
well, we're not granted the easement that everybody else had to get out of this. If we'd known you were going to get us in here, we would have been here with those other 300 people.
I
And
agree.
would have been excused like they were for the same reasons that we're asking for here.
There'll be two town council meetings after we make the recommendation on this subject, right? So that's going to be the place where you want to get the people there. So, but keep on giving feedback. All these things go on the record and there's a couple of things. We're trying to get the state to hear this so that my hope is that when the reality of all this starts happening, they're going to say, wait a minute, we asked everybody to do too much and make it too dense. So I'm hoping that there's a reality that sets in on the law itself. That the other thing is we've got to, there's a whole lot of sort of pressure on Atherton from the standpoint of, those rich people, they don't want anybody in their town. So there's very little sympathy for our number problem. So you got at the state level and they don't even hear what we say. So what we're trying to do is stay off the radar screen, get to the point where their reality sets in, and there's a correction done to make the region work. Because right now, my belief is it's a regional plan is not a very good one. But
Appreciate that. And if
keep-
I could say just two things.
Okay.
One, you know, the town set 7 principles in order to have a multifamily dwelling put in at an R10. If you look at those principles, almost none of them are fitting the road on Bay Road and Ringwood. And secondly, I've spoken with a number of the people who live on Bay and Ringwood. They have their forever homes.
Right.
They are putting money into their homes now and fixing them up. They do not intend, and they've permitted me to say, they do not intend to ever sell these homes.
Right.
And will not sell them during this period on this element. So
Great.
before 2031, they will not sell them. And this is an illusory idea to begin with.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, this gentleman in the back, he's been waiting for a while. He put his hand up, I think, second, and you're just getting up now. So thank you for waiting.
No worries. Thank you. I'm actually neighbors with John and Pamela here on Frederick Avenue.
Can you say your name one more time?
Yeah, I'm a neighbor with John and Pamela on the Frederick Avenue. My name is Navneet.
Yeah.
So I actually went through the housing, like the plans and all the mitigation things very cursorily looking. These are lots of long documents. And there are certain aspects which are found, which we also raised in the, in the city council meetings. So in the traffic mitigation plan, which is, I think the document is transportation analysis on the page 4. And this is true for Bay Road and the Ringwood. I would also say this is also true for Ravenwood. These are all 2-lane roads. Both the Bay Road and the Ringwood are all 2-lane roads. And the plan specifically says that it would operate with high delays equivalent to loss E during the AM peak hours.
Right.
And then the further report says that, hey, but it can be mitigated. But what is that mitigation is not clear.
Right.
Okay, there is a plan thrown very cursorily that there would be left-only turn, but it's a 2-lane road both ways. How are we going to turn left-only road?
That's what we were talking about earlier.
And then there was another comment that, hey, we'll make it one way. Okay, if we are making it one way, then how would people go from, how would I get out of the home to get to Marsh, or how would I get out of the home to get to the Willow Road? So we are just throwing something out there that, hey, it can be mitigated, but we haven't seen any plans for those mitigations. I would also want to emphasize that, so I have 2 kids, they go to Laurel and Upper schools. They both bike, and one of them goes on his own. The second one would be old enough now to go on her own. These roads also need bike lanes. So if you actually look at the Menlo Park school districts plans, they are actually in discussion with planning commissions very heavily on what to do for the kids' safety on the Ringwood, Bay Road, and the Coleman Avenue during the peak hours.
Right.
So that's one comment, which is there is analysis thrown out, which is there in the report, but it's being overlooked in some sense. Another argument which I want to make is this is, now we can go in each one of these. I'll just want to pick these 2, the noise and the vibration assessment. So I find it bizarre that all of these assessments are done at 11 a.m., 10 a.m. or something like that. I think if we ask any of the resident what's the peak hour, that assessment is right around 8:30 to 9.
Right, exactly.
The report already says that the noise level reached to about 87 dB. So that's just close to large truck going right by you. And this is at 11 a.m. The analysis was done on these roads. So I just feel that if the intention is indeed to actually reflect the true condition, we need to go to the worst case scenario.
Right.
For noise mitigation. We can't have the average reported by doing the noise, because loud noise is loud noise, at a peak loud noise at any moment can be a very loud noise. So that's, there is time is limited, so I'll just make one more comment. It's also not clear when earlier in the meeting, it was made comment that, hey, city has 34 feet height limit, and but it hasn't been really followed through. So let's just strike it off. What I'm trying to understand is, okay, it hasn't been followed through. How many exceptions are there? What is the height of that exceptions when they were made? Are we just going to say that, where is the evidence? How many homes have crossed that thing? Where is that evidence? So that information is not there, and we're just proposing that, oops, there was something in there, we didn't follow through it, let's just strike it off. And none of the evidence for the exceptions made in the past, for what reasons they were made, is there, and we are just changing very quickly the whole rules without explaining what happened.
Now, I've been on the planning commission for 12 years, and I don't know of any height exceptions. I do know existing the buildings that were made before, like 20 years ago, there's some very steep, tall properties. So as far as I know, in the 12 years that I've been here, I've never approved an exception on height. So Brittany.
Yeah, sure. The example that immediate to mind is the new dormitory, I believe, on Menlo College. That's
Yeah.
at 40 feet.
Yeah, yeah. And I didn't vote to approve that one. Yeah, I remember. But in terms of in the neighborhoods, I don't know of any exceptions on
So,
height.
and we can certainly provide additional information on where that's been inconsistent. My larger point is that it doesn't belong in the general plan. Any sort of height limitation needs to be articulated in the zoning code, because that's where development standards typically live. We wouldn't put FAR, for example, in the general plan, or setback requirements in the general plan. And so for that reason, it should be removed. If the town wants to discuss raising or lowering the height limitations, I'm very supportive of that, but I would really
You want to
suggest that it lives in the zoning
Right,
code.
so if we
So that was
decide to
like
lower
the
it.
bigger point that I was trying to
Yeah,
make.
if the limit remains 34 in that plan, but as soon as we shift there and we change it, then again, we need to know why are we changing that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you for waiting too. All right, anyone else ready to speak? Go ahead.
I'd like to, I'm Dave Hepperger. I'm at 29 Frederick, and we are the longest tenured residents on the street of 12 houses. Former Mayor Bob Huber is number one, probably turning over in his grave right now at all this. And I just, Mr. Bryant mentioned a critical issue over there is, how can delivery trucks stop? There's half as much space from the curb on Bay Road to the fence. Somebody dumped a mattress in front of one of them a week or so ago, and it was diagonal. It wouldn't even fit this way. So, there's no parking. The traffic in the morning, I'm in Frederick, so I go the other way for that reason. And it's going to be a nightmare.
Yep.
I mean,
I agree.
You can't put multi-units there. And I appreciate what Brittany and all you folks are doing to try to convince these bureaucrats. I know they're just trying to solve a legitimate problem of housing issues. Different issue, Redwood City just had a 178 or something unit building, 4 parking places.
Right.
I mean, it's a
Right.
problem.
Yep.
So I appreciate what you're doing. And, I'm back on that really nice 2-story house. Such good neighbors that we even gave them access through our back area
I saw that.
into Lindenwood.
Yeah. I saw
They're nice people, but to have a multi-unit,
Yeah.
not the same.
Thank you.
Thank you all for your
Thank you for waiting too. All right, anyone else? Go ahead, come on up.
Hi, I'm Haven McKayleen. My husband came in or called over the phone. So we're at 964 Ringwood, literally right across from 999. We have 4 drivers in our household. I can tell you in the morning, we can't get out of our driveway.
Right.
Between the traffic and the noise, I literally can't get out. So if you take that 999 and you add 10 units, and I'm gonna say there are probably 4 people per family in that, and number of cars, I literally don't know how we're gonna get to work or get to kids to school or anything else, not to mention the noise. And I agree with the gentleman who talked about what time of day the noise happened, because 11 o'clock in the morning, I can tell you we work from home, one of us. No, it's really pretty quiet. But when you're talking about 8 a.m., we can't walk our dogs. I can't get out of the driveway. And this is even prior to that. This is just when I was driving my kids up the road to go to school. Then you talk about starting at 2 p.m. in the afternoon when it starts backing up and I have to sneak my way through Lindenwood to get to any place I want to go. So adding this many units, I realize you were going to be adding 40 units within less than a mile of my house. I can only imagine what the traffic, sound, et cetera is going to be.
Yep, I agree with you. All right, thank you. Thank you for waiting too. All right, anybody online need to talk at this point? I don't see any hands or indication of anyone there. All right, so as I mentioned earlier, there's time to get the thoughts in. There are a couple things. First of all, every thought, every statement made gets recorded and put into this whole the history of this whole process. I'm personally hoping that the things that get documented along the way make it so that there's more input on what the reality of this really is. You know, the idea that, well, all you got to do is get everybody to take a bike to work and then everything's going to be fine. You know, it just doesn't make any sense to me. So, and deliveries and all the real world situations that go on with these changes that are being imposed. But again, we want a plan that gets accepted so that we can start working on a better reality than what happened without it. So let's figure out what in the next month, what other clarification of what the statements about height really look like on what properties, so that we really know what we're talking about in terms of buildability and what the number really looks like. There's somebody speaking. There's somebody online. All right, go ahead. Who is it?
We have Amanda. I'll ask to unmute.
All right. Amanda, you're up.
Hi there. I'm a Menlo Park resident, apparently within 500 feet of Atherton, in the part of Menlo Park that kind of juts into Atherton. I think one thing that I haven't seen addressed in any of these plans is building sidewalks in Atherton. I'm not sure what the history is there or why it's not addressed, but one of the reasons that I drive my child to school at Encinal is because it's too dangerous to walk without a sidewalk. There's like at rush hour, there's, tons of people driving. So I think it really is, having lived in New York before, in Manhattan and Brooklyn, nobody owns a car. Everybody walks or takes the subway everywhere because it would be too difficult to drive. So I think here, obviously we're not heading toward New York, but if it's too difficult to drive, your only other option is to walk and take public transport. But we need sidewalks for that.
Yeah.
So what are the chances of getting some sidewalks? Thank you.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that's unlikely given the history of the community that's always decided that no sidewalks are a more rural nature. I mean, as we continue to grow and that may have to be looked at, but I don't think it's going to be this cycle at all.
No, I actually disagree with that. Again, going back to the transportation study, this is the question of the mitigation measures. So in those tier 1, tier 2, having sidewalks is a requirement.
Yeah, I know, but so they go to dead end of R10 and then they don't go anywhere.
Yeah, that's true. But
so
we're still going to put sidewalks.
Yeah. So it's
the same thing on Ravenswood.
Yeah, which is really smart planning, isn't it? Okay, so so Amanda, you're right, and thank you for saying that, and I I live over off of Middlefield and down, every morning I have more and more difficulty getting out on the Middlefield. So I always go the back road back to 14th and down the back roads to Marsh. So it's real, the traffic is a real thing that we've got to deal with on this. And we'll come up with it. We'll keep on bringing it up and we'll keep on highlighting it. And then the other thing that's a mitigation is whether or not the things actually get built. All right, I'm gonna pull this now and bring it back and close the public session hearing tonight. We are gonna have more time. The staff is available. You know, keep on. You can email it to the city site, and we'll continue to get feedback. We'll put it on the record. We'll come up with a plan that gets accepted, and we'll come up with a plan that we can live with, and that's come up with a way to keep on saying, you know, get smarter with our statewide planning. Brittany, did you have any wrap up for us on this, or Tom, either one of you?
I'll just reiterate the timeline that we're on. We are past a statutory deadline of January 31st, 2024. So we do have some pressure on us to move forward. That is why our recommendation is to continue this to another meeting in August. We weren't required to come to the Planning Commission twice, but given the volume of information, we wanted to kind of get through everything publicly and give everybody kind of a 1 month clock to respond to, acknowledging that it then also has to go to the city council. And as I previously mentioned, any sort of zoning code text updates does require 2 hearings. So we know that we're going to at least have 2 hearings with the city council. Right now, we're looking at the regular meeting in September and the regular meeting in October. We also have received a notice of violation from HCD, which is their way of putting us on notice from a timing standpoint. The city manager's office and I are having meetings with HCD to look at how expedited the hearing process needs to move. At that point, I feel comfortable at least with this August timeline. But I do want to make sure that everybody's following the website with the timeline for the city council meetings, because that's where I'll be posting any sort of alerts in terms of moving outside of regular scheduled meetings. We'll also be using public notification and emails, but just know that I am trying to put everything on the website and be as resourceful there as possible. With that, I can turn it back to you.
All right, any comments for staff before we go, or before we go to the next item? All right. Good.
Well, we'll ask at the end.
All right. With that then, thank you all for coming. We're selling tickets next month. So we'll look for you there. And then we'll go on to item number 5. All right. And this is for the annual election of chair and vice chair.
I have a motion to make.
Yes. Yeah.
I nominate Commissioner Lane to continue being chair of the Planning Commission. And I
Second.
nominate Mr. Polito, Commissioner Polito, to be vice chair.
All right. Is this one of those times when?
I'll second that motion.
Is this one of those times when 2 guys just stand there and the other guys step back?
That could be
it.
First guy in gets to make the motion.
All right, good. All right, on the chair, we'll have all in favor say aye.
Aye.
I'm going to vote for myself this time, one of the few times, only because they're not a 5th member. I always abstain normally. And then on the vice chair, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Bob?
Aye.
Okay. I was watching you. All right, 4-0. All right, very good. Okay. Let's see. Staff report?
I will pass tonight.
All right, good. I've got a couple things that commissioner reports. First of all, you'll be getting an email from Cristobal Mendoza, who's a management analyst with Atherton. Is she with you guys, or she was?
You've met her before because the town stole her from M Group.
Yeah.
So she was
Yeah.
a planner with us and now she's the management analyst in the city.
Right. I
manager's
thought,
office. Yeah.
when I talked to her, I thought I'd met her as a planner, but not as an analyst. So here's what it is. There's an annual, I think it's an annual, community survey. And, and there's a form that she's going to send, she sent me, but, I want to make everybody get involved with it. The form asking some topics that we might want to ask the community about planning. All right. So what she's going to do, she's going to BCC each one of us. She's going to copy Brittany and herself, and then any feedback on the form send back to those two, Brittany and or Cristobal, and then they'll consolidate it and it'll be on our agenda next month. All right. All right. So then we can discuss it and say, based on there's some overlap or there's not overlap, what do we want to say? And we want to make sure that our questions are helpful and don't create a new problem. But there are also things that the community gives us feedback on the planning process. All right. All right. That'll be coming to you soon.
Okay.
What I'll do, Brittany, is I'll send an email to you and Cristobal and saying, hey, let's go ahead and release that. That way you don't have to bother with it. And then she'll release it. All right. The other thing is, thank you, Brittany, for the recap on the Parkline development stuff that you sent. That was helpful, and there's all kinds of stuff there.
And on that, there was a meeting scheduled a month ago with Parkline and with a nonprofit developer.
Right.
Is
So-
that going to get rescheduled?
Hopefully. We don't have a specific date for it. It would be likely early August at this point, or sorry, mid-August. Early August is right around the corner.
Okay.
It's not on any official calendar at this point, but I can let you know.
All right, good.
I would think it'd be that study session would be a good place to plug it in.
There's a study session with the council in early September. It's not currently included on that. I think it might have to deal with the speaker's vacation. I don't really know what the circumstances are.
All right. Anything else, Commissioner? Yes. Tom?
Yeah, I do. So I just want to be clear about the Brown Act. So there's a lot of content here and everybody, all of us are going to have a lot of information to feed back. In an ideal world, if I sent an email and copied the whole planning commission, but they did not respond.
Yeah, well, that's because you can't, first of all, you shouldn't copy all the planning commission because that's a Brown Act violation.
Well, that's what I'm trying to clarify.
Yeah, so that what we do is you send it to Brittany and say, hey, could you distribute this to the commission? And then she BCCs us, and that comes from her, and it's BCC so that we don't accidentally reply all,
Okay.
right? That's the way-
Right. I mean, the key thing is avoiding any deliberation amongst a group of commissioners, a subset of commissioners outside of this venue, because really the discussion that you would be having or that you would, anything that you would want to share, the public would benefit from having access to that conversation as well. So it's okay to have one-on-one discussions with me. It becomes problematic when it goes beyond that.
And one-on-one discussions among ourselves, as long as they're not sequential.
Correct.
Yeah, we can have, but just.
We can have Andreas provide a little bit of an update by email, and then we can revisit it again at a later date just to make sure that we're all clear and on the same page.
Yeah, my point is, I mean, there's a incredible amount of detail here. And ideally what we want to spend the next month doing is trying to drive toward a consensus of
Right.
what it
Usually
should look like.
Usually you'd have a study session in the middle of this, and the study session would be the way we hash through that.
Yeah.
But because of timing and the cycle with the town council, it's not possible to have a study session for a couple of reasons. One, because of her time,
Yeah.
and two, because we munched through a lot of this stuff. So as quickly as we can get information to Brittany that looks like, oh, this sounds like something everybody needs to talk about, let's get it to her early, and then we'll figure it out. Because in the corporate setting, you just have a meeting and you just be able to do it, right? In this setting, you can't do that. And in fact, I would say that with four members of the commission, rather than 5, it's actually a little bit close to the line of just like 2 people connecting. Just from the standpoint of, because of the number of people here. That's the other thing I wanted to comment on. is that we did have, an appointment on the commission and it didn't work out. And then Nancy decided, then it would have gone back to Nancy, but Nancy decided that she didn't want to go for another term. So,
There's no volunteers?
there's somebody that's applied, that Anthony mentioned to me. That's coming up. There's also anybody that you know, but the idea is that there's no appointment yet. And that person probably would not be, that person won't be in the next meeting because the town council meeting doesn't come until afterwards. So we'll be 4 next time. So everybody stay healthy.
Yep.
So that we get a majority. All right, with that, I need a motion to adjourn.
I'll move.
All right.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, very good. Thank you.
Nice meeting.
Oh, man, thank
So
you.
done.
Oh, man. Oh, man.
That was yeoman's work there.
Oh, man. I just